On the 19th of June 2014, in the early hours of the morning, emergency services received a 999 call. The police and paramedics arrived in Cook Street. They found a young man propped up against one of the walls. About his person, they found a small brown bottle of liquid.
His pants were back to front, there was blood in his mouth, he was cold, so he would have been dead for some time. It's highly unusual for a young person of that age to just collapse and die.
There's going to be immediate questions. How did they end up here? Who are they? Where have they been? But also, who was the person that called 999 and where are they now?
When Ryan Edwards moved to a new flat in 2005, he was keen to become part of the local community.
When I first moved to Barking, it was seen as, you know, not a very trendy area of London. It was not known as a particularly gay area. I felt like I was the only gay in the village, effectively.
Soon after moving in, Ryan introduced himself to his neighbour, Stephen Port, a 30-year-old chef.
I think we quickly established that we were both gay. We said we'd meet for a coffee sometime, and we swapped numbers. Stephen was very softly spoken, and he came across to me as a pretty harmless soul. He reminded me actually a little bit of the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant. He was very, very tall and slightly sort of lumbering.
In search of a more vibrant gay scene, the new friends planned nights out further afield.
It was at that time that I found Stephen's interaction with people really limiting. He was very socially awkward. When I tried to introduce people to him, he'd get his phone out and almost ignore them.
Stephen Port, as an adult, was quite an odd person. He was very, very childlike. He could be quite naive. First of all, his type was much younger than him, skinny, what is known in the gay community as a twink. He would like them to look a lot younger.
Stephen would often say to me, oh, hey neighbour, come round for a coffee and meet my new guy. And this was several times a week. He was in his 30s, he was a little bit older than myself. And so these young guys he was introducing to me were sometimes quite young, you know, obviously over the age of consent, but I thought to myself sometimes, not very much.
Despite his quirks, Stephen Port proved popular on the dating scene.
He was often meeting men, and I remember thinking at the time, how was he meeting these guys? I quickly realised that he was finding a lot of guys online.
If you're a shy person like Stephen Port, it's very attractive to have access to dating apps. He doesn't have to go into a well-lit bar and try and charm somebody and make a fool of himself.
Online profiles allow you to create a curated image of yourself. The danger with online is that you never truly know who you're talking to.
Emergency ambulance, what's the address of the emergency?
Cook Street, there's a young boy, he looks like he's collapsed or anesthesia or something. Always just drunk.
What's the telephone number you're calling from?
I'm just pulling up in the car, I'll go get my car on the park.
Right, don't worry about that. What's the telephone number you're calling from? Hello?
A call goes into the ambulance service on June the 19th, right from the off, sounded very suspicious. Somebody didn't want to give their details, then when they were asked for details, rung off.
The police don't seem to have a lot of information to go off in this case, but they do have one thing, which is the phone number from the 999 call.
When you find a dead body, you need to be making sure you speak to the witnesses, because they could be a suspect, they could be an innocent person, but you need to find that information out.
Police discovered the 999 caller was Stephen Port. Officers were dispatched to his flat in Cook Street.
Stephen Port gives his account that he found a young person outside making gargling noises. He slapped him, moved the body. I mean, all of that is slightly different from the account he gave to the 999 call. The alarm bells would have been ringing.
In his statement, Port tells police that he went to bed after calling 999.
Stephen Port's claim that he went inside and went to sleep contradicts the 999 call itself.
Hello?
Hello, the ambulance service. Well, I can't see there. Just confirm the location.
Oh, I'm just giving it away now.
It is incredibly suspicious that there are already inconsistencies in 2 accounts from a single individual in relation to a young man's death.
The police had identified the young man as Anthony Walgate, a 23-year-old student from Hull. The toxicology report later confirmed Anthony had died from a GHB overdose.
GHB is one of those drugs that is known to be used in something called chemsex. Chemsex is sexual activity enhanced by taking drugs, essentially. And GHB can be used consensually by people, but it can also be very dangerous, and in some cases it can result in fatalities.
Barking and Dagenham Police would be responsible for this investigation at this stage, and as there's more and more suspicion comes up there, you'd expect them to bring in the experts, because they don't have the expertise to deal with homicide investigations.
Specialist officers from the Major Investigations Team were brought in and determined Anthony Walgate's death to be unexplained, leaving local officers to continue with inquiries.
Anthony's mother did not accept the narrative that the police had accepted. She was very bravely saying to police, have you checked this? Have you done this?
Anthony's friends were also suspicious and came forward with more information about his occasional work as an escort.
Friends of Anthony told the police that he was working as an escort on the night that he died. He had agreed a fee of £800 for one night to meet a man who had signed off as Joe Dean.
He looked after himself. He sent details of people he was meeting, the location, the pictures to friends, so friends could keep an eye on him and ensure that his safety.
Anthony's friends gave police the name and address they'd received from him on the night of his death.
Police discover that Joe Dean, in fact, is Stephen Port, and all the pieces of the jigsaw are coming together. Stephen Port was clearly the last person who saw Anthony alive.
7 days after the discovery of Anthony Walgate's body, police arrested Stephen Port on suspicion of perverting the course of justice for deliberately misleading the police investigation. Port's laptop was seized from his flat.
Stephen Port's laptop would have the history between the interactions between him and Anthony. It may have videos, it may have photographs, text. There's a real richness of potential information, evidence that could have been gathered. There's clearly inconsistencies in the story, and he's not been telling the truth.
Port was questioned about his fake identity of Joe Dean.
Stephen Port admitted to police that he had hired Anthony Walgate as an escort. He claimed they had consensual sex, that Anthony had brought GHB with him, and he took that voluntarily.
Port claimed that he'd moved Anthony outside when he'd been unable to wake him from a deep sleep.
His account in the interview is that the reason why he moved the body is because he thought that the suspicion would fall on him that he'd actually murdered Anthony.
Port is trying to present this scared and timid character that didn't tell the police out of shame and fear, I think to try and buy some sympathy from the police. But now finding out that Port actually had had sex with Anthony, found him dead, moved his body, and then went back to sleep, that has to suggest some very alarming behaviours from this man.
Port is charged but released on bail. His laptop is not analysed. Neighbour Ryan, who was unaware of Port's involvement in the case, had started to notice changes in Stephen's behaviour as his obsession with dating apps continued.
I went around there and he was looking a bit rough, and I was taken aback because there was a really large container sat on the coffee table, and it was full of white bags and little vials of, I think, a clear liquid. He did get his boy, as he would call them, out of the bedroom and to meet me, but the guy was clearly under the influence of something. When I quizzed Stephen on this, I recall he said some guys like to have some to spice up, you know, the sex life in the bedroom, so it's no big deal, neighbour, it's completely under control.
On August 24th, Ryan was introduced to another young man Port had met online.
I think I met Gabriel on the first day he moved in to Stephen's. Stephen said to me, "Oh, hey neighbour, come around for a coffee, meet my new guy." Gabriel immediately struck me as someone a bit different to Stephen's normal type. He was an aspiring artist, really bright, articulate, intelligent young man.
Gabriel Kovari was Slovakian by birth. He had moved to London in his early 20s. He makes contact online with Stephen Port, who says that he can stay at his flat on the sofa for free.
A day later, Gabriel and Stephen visited Ryan's flat. When Stephen left the room, Gabriel confided in Ryan about his new landlord.
Gabriel kind of leant into me and whispered to me to say, "Ryan, Stephen is not the person you think he is. He's not a nice person." And obviously that was really disturbing to hear, but I couldn't kind of investigate that and what was meant by that further because Stephen came back. But I thought at that point, okay, well, perhaps Gabriel's idea of staying at Stephen's and Stephen's idea of Gabriel staying is different. I messaged Gabriel to say, if you're uncomfortable at Stephen's for whatever reason, you're more than welcome to stay at mine for a couple of nights until you find somewhere longer term. And Gabriel said, "Oh yeah, great, let me get back to you." And he didn't.
When Gabriel failed to reply, Ryan messaged Port in search of answers.
Initially it was that, oh, Gabriel's left. I think he's gone to stay with some sort of army guy, I don't know, but I'm a bit worried. I wouldn't let this go because it was still sitting quite uneasily with me. And he said, "Oh, I haven't heard anything. Do you think I should go to the police?" And I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, this is a bit odd. And I said, well, you know, maybe if you think that's best, but it's only been a few days. Maybe he'll get back in touch with you.
3 days after Gabriel's disappearance, a local dog walker discovered the body of a young man slumped against a wall in St. Margaret's churchyard.
The dog walker talks about the body being propped with their back against the wall, wearing sunglasses, a bit of a wonky position on their head and covering their eyes.
Police identified the man as Gabriel Kovari, and the pathology report later determined the cause of death to be a GHB overdose.
You've got another young person just a very short distance away from where Anthony's body was found. I think you'd be asking a few questions around why this has happened.
Friends and family of Gabriel flagged their concerns to police, but within 5 hours of discovering his body, Gabriel's death was classified as unexplained but not suspicious.
I think there was some stereotypes around people, young gay men, stereotyping about the drug scene within the gay community, so I think the police had come to that conclusion and weren't really prepared to entertain other potential scenarios.
2 weeks after meeting Gabriel, Ryan finally received news on his disappearance from Stephen.
He said, "Oh, neighbour, something really tragic has happened. I've heard that Gabriel went home, contracted a mysterious illness and has died. And whatever you do, please don't mention this on social media because I don't want to upset his friends and family even more than they are."
The discovery of Gabriel's body goes unreported in the local press. and no information is released to the LGBT community by police. Ryan didn't hear about Gabriel's overdose.
I remember thinking at the time, this is really unusual. Young people that seem to be healthy don't just pick up viruses and die. But with the lack of any evidence to the contrary, I had to kind of take Stephen's word at face value.
On September 18th, 2014, another young man went missing. He is 21-year-old Daniel Whitworth.
I'd met Daniel probably at the end of 2011 through Adam, his father, who I'd just recently met and was starting to date. It actually felt quite nice coming into the family. I felt like I'd gained a son. You know, I thought he was a really nice lad. He had real ambition, and he was very much like his dad in looks and in personality in a lot of ways. A very, very gentle lad.
Daniel, an up-and-coming chef, lived in Kent with his long-term boyfriend.
We never worried too much about the boys. We knew they were looking after themselves, everything was fine.
Concerned that Daniel hadn't arrived home, his partner contacted Mandy.
They used to fight like most couples, you know, they had their down times. The worry really settled in when he hadn't attended work. Daniel always went to work. Nothing stopped Daniel from going to work. All we could do was wait to hear. It's a horrible, horrible place to be in. Terrible place to be in.
2 days after Daniel went missing, the same dog walker made another shocking discovery in St. Margaret's churchyard.
Police arrived at the scene to this dead body. They find a man wrapped in a blue sheet. They find a note in a plastic cellophane cover. And then they find a bottle with some liquid in it.
I answered the door to two policemen who immediately removed their hats. It was just a massively sinking feeling. They said they'd found him deceased in a churchyard in Barking, and it appeared as though he'd taken his own life. There are no words to describe that. They said it looked like an overdose, and there was a note found. He'd left a suicide note. We wanted to see the note because as parents, you are hanging on to every little word.
Police sent a portion of the note to the Whitworths on an email to confirm Daniel's handwriting.
We communicate via text. I don't see Daniel's handwriting. You're going to get samples of his handwriting from his workplace, from his home. You need to go and have a look. We don't know. We can't verify that.
Daniel's family reported being unable to confirm the handwriting, but it was later revealed to have been marked as verified by officers.
That note then has a legitimacy with the police and with the investigation team as a genuine note.
The contents of the note also raised concerns for Daniel's family.
The note makes several claims. It says that he has taken all of the GHB that he has on him because he feels guilty about the death of somebody who in the note is referred to as Gabriel E13.
Nobody knew who Gabriel was. There were questions galore, and our heads were spinning.
The story in the note is that the pair were having sex with the use of drugs, so chemsex, and Daniel got carried away and gave Gabriel some more GHB, and he didn't notice that Gabriel had stopped breathing while they were having sex.
And we said, well, Daniel, don't do drugs. And we knew he didn't do that, and we knew he certainly wouldn't do anything like that.
The note says that he's feeling dizzy now and that he dropped his mobile phone. So you have this impression that he must be writing this note either on that spot or as he's walking up to that spot. And at some point he feels the need to say, BTW, by the way, please do not blame the guy I was with last night. He knows nothing of what I have done.
Despite the mention of another man in the note, the police did not go on to investigate his identity.
Why would you worry about what happened after you've gone to somebody else? You know, it was just mind-blowing. And the first thing we said was, this says nothing of Daniel. Nothing in this note says anything of Daniel.
The Whitworths continue to raise their concerns about the credibility of the note with police.
Because you expect the police to be doing their job, you've got nothing but their word to take. How do you even begin to work your way out of a situation where so much information depends on one organisation and you can't feed into it?
On the same day Daniel's body was discovered, his death was classified as non-suspicious by the duty inspector.
The police decide to close down the crime scene fairly quickly, and there just didn't seem to be that professional curiosity.
There is this pattern emerging. This suicide note is actually identifying that it could be through someone else administering the drug that they died. And if they'd followed that line of investigation, they'd have discovered that it was true. Someone else had been administering those drugs, but it wasn't Daniel.
3 young men had been found dead in as many months in East London.
As soon as you know that there are 3 bodies found within 400 yards of one another, they're all a similar age, all who have died of a drugs overdose, there are really worrying signs of suspicious activity.
Is there somebody targeting gay men? Is there something around the drugs that these men are taking?
It's a matter of public concern and safety.
Journalists posed the question to Barking and Dagenham police to find out if the deaths were being linked or treated as suspicious.
I think they were pretty astounded when the police told local journalists that none of those deaths were connected. They were unusual but not suspicious.
9 months after his arrest, Stephen Port was sentenced to 8 months imprisonment for perverting the course of justice. He was not under suspicion for the death of Anthony Walgate, and no connection had been made between him and the other 2 victims. Neighbour Ryan, who was unaware of Stephen's conviction, was struggling to contact him.
I messaged Stephen a few times and didn't get a response, which was kind of unusual, so I messaged one of his friends. I got a very vague response back from this friend that something had happened, Stephen had got, involved in something he shouldn't and was in prison.
Port served just 2 months and 13 days of the sentence and was released on tag.
I think on a new number, Stephen messages me. Obviously, I say to Stephen, what's happened? What's been happening? And he replies back something very vague, but, a neighbour, it was a silly mistake of mine that has kind of cost me dearly. And so then I looked back at my experiences and thought, okay, my concerns with the large quantity of drugs that Stephen had on his coffee table, then yes, he was dealing.
In June 2015, a coroner's inquest was held into the deaths of Gabriel Cavari and Daniel Whitworth, 9 months after their bodies were found.
I think for the families it was the last bastion of hope in terms of having more information coming to the public domain.
The coroner raised concerns about forensic analysis carried out on the bedsheet Daniel was found in.
A police officer at the inquest was asked about the bedsheet being tested or not tested. And he said something along the lines of the reason to test it would have been obviously to determine who he was with the night before, in case that helped. But he said something like that wasn't put forward or pursued at the time.
And that was a significant and clear failure on the part of the police. It just beggars belief why they didn't do it.
Things were just glaringly obvious then that things had been missed. The job hadn't been done.
Questions were asked about the suicide note, a key piece of evidence in the investigation.
The note had never been shown to his partner, and the family says that they never gave that assurance that it was definitely Daniel's handwriting. No fingerprints or DNA analysis of the sleeve that the suicide note was in, and the suicide note itself. No handwriting analysis.
I thought it was something that they'd slipped the note into to protect it when they gave it to us to read. Everything just came crashing down in my head. How could he possibly slip that in a plastic cover, having passed out writing his own note?
The coroner recorded an open verdict for the deaths of both Gabriel Cavari and Daniel Whitworth.
Because she couldn't say for sure that Daniel had taken his own life from the information she'd been given. It was left open. So I remember thinking, great, we can have another go.
If you've got a suicide note at an inquest and the coroner's not convinced it was suicide, that should set alarm bells ringing. The police, I think, should carry on investigating those deaths, but they didn't. They did not at that time treat those deaths as suspicious.
Even though we'd been presented with all this new information, we weren't allowed to go back over it. That was it. I felt gutted.
The family are left with lots of unanswered questions, but actually the matter is concluded and there's not a lot of things they can do from now on.
I left that inquest knowing that we were nowhere near finished. They might have been finished with us, but we weren't finished with them.
12 weeks later, the case took another turn when police in Barking were called to a familiar location.
On the 14th of September 2015, a fourth body was found close to St Margaret's Church.
The body was found on the other side of the wall from where Gabriel and Daniel's bodies were discovered. The similarities didn't end there.
He didn't have his phone, and there was a small bottle around his body. There were signs that he had died of a drugs overdose.
The young man was identified as 25-year-old Jack Taylor. Police believed he had likely died of an overdose. His family were informed.
His family were devastated, obviously, when they found out. And the sisters of Jack Taylor were also shocked at the conclusion that the police had come to. Their brother wasn't known for doing drugs. As a forklift truck driver, he would have had to submit to regular drugs tests.
Unconvinced by the police investigation into the death of their brother, sisters Donna and Jen took matters into their own hands.
Jack's sisters basically found out that there was two other men who'd been found in the cemetery. Then they found out about Anthony, who was found 400 metres away. So Jack Taylor was the fourth young person to have died in suspicious circumstances in this area. And I think they then demanded that the police did more.
Donna and Jen did a lot of work, especially for people grieving, a lot of very impressive work to join dots that the police were not joining. What we know is that during his night out, in the early hours of the morning, he was on a dating app and they arranged to meet at, I think, about 3 a.m. at Barking train station.
The sisters presented their findings to police, appealing for further investigations to be carried out.
Jack's sisters had a similar experience dealing with the police at Barking and Dagenham to what the other families had had. All the families were doing their own research, sharing information with the police, and the police just had dismissed it.
Jack's sisters discovered CCTV cameras where Jack had been on the night of his death and requested the footage from police.
Donna and Jen watched the CCTV, and there was a man next to Jack Taylor, considerably taller than Jack Taylor, sort of looming. And they obviously wanted to know who that man was.
Jack's sisters demanded that the images be released to the media to try and identify the man in the CCTV.
The police were not enthusiastic about releasing the footage. They didn't seem to understand the urgency, the starkness of how wrong their conclusions seemed to the sisters. And it's only because the family was so tenacious and dogged that the footage ended up getting released.
It's actually a Barking police officer who recognises the man in the image as Stephen Port. He remembers him from his involvement in Anthony's case, where Stephen was arrested for perverting the course of justice. And now, at last, a thread starts to form between these multiple cases.
The ambulance, what's the address of the emergency?
Cook Street, there's a young boy, looks like he's trapped outside, I don't know.
What's the telephone number you're calling from?
I'm just holding up the car, I've got to get my car to the parking.
That's alright, don't worry about that. What's the telephone number you're calling from? Hello?
You have to wonder why it is that Port even made that call to 999. Was it that he was trying to alleviate some of the guilt he felt for what had happened? Or was it simply that he was trying to regain some control over the situation?
On the 15th of October, Stephen Port was arrested on suspicion of murdering Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth and Jack Taylor. The major investigations team took over the case, searching Port's flat and seizing his laptop and mobile phone.
Stephen Port's flat in Cook Street, it was odd. I mean, loads of children's toys, loads of porn, homemade videos on his phone.
Police finally conduct a proper search of Stephen Port's laptop and mobiles. They discover 83 videos, some of them include him
A couple of streets away from me.
This is Jack Taylor. Do you recognise that man?
He denied knowing Jack Taylor, but there's CCTV footage of him walking with him.
So you don't recognise his face?
I do not know. No.
And I mean, that's Jack Taylor, so you don't recognise
No, I don't.
Jack Taylor?
No.
I mean, it would be risible were it not so outrageous. It's such an obviously stupid thing for someone in his position to say.
3 of the 4 people that have been found dead were found slumped up against the wall here of the Abbey. Pardon?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? So that's news to you, is it? Did you put them there?
No.
And Stephen, did you write this letter?
No, I didn't.
Photos of it was found with Daniel. Are you telling us the truth, Stephen?
I'm telling you the truth, yes.
About the letter?
Yes.
With a compelling body of evidence against him, Port was charged with the murder of all 4 men, and a date for trial was set.
I was hanging on to every fibre of my being for the fight ahead of me, because he cannot walk. He cannot walk away from this one after a few measly years. It can't happen.
On October 5th, 2016, Stephen Port went on trial.
The real education came at the Old Bailey. All the families met each other. Everybody was in their own personal nightmare.
Port was charged with 4 counts of murder, multiple rapes and sexual assaults. He pleaded not guilty.
What was jarring about that is he sat there acting like he's been called up on a bit of graffiti or something, and he was just like bored. He was just looking around the room.
He never made eye contact with me, and he was bold and bolshy and joked with the policeman that he was chained to, and smiled a lot and made me hate him even more.
The court heard evidence from the analysis of Port's laptop and search history.
The type of search terms used painted a picture of drug rape pornography, which was really powerful evidence for the jury to understand Stephen Port's motivation.
This is someone who's clearly motivated and obsessively engaging with very graphic, very violent, extreme pornographic content, and essentially taking that fantasy into a reality.
The horrific reality of Port's fantasy was played for the jury in court.
A video from his own hard drive that shows him engaging in sexual activities with an unconscious man. Port denies this and says that this was purely the end result of quote-unquote normal sex.
One of the obvious defenses for Stephen Port is that this is just a terrible accident, and he never intended to kill or cause really serious harm.
Now, that is such a wild assertion, because even if it could be some form of defence for a singular occurrence, for this to happen 4 times over the course of a matter of months suggests that even if they were accidental, that there was such a careless disregard for human life that it is equated with murder anyway.
Surviving victims came forward at trial to testify against Stephen Port.
The prosecution did a fantastic job of just going through painstakingly every allegation that was made against him. There's some incredibly brave witnesses who came to court and told their stories.
The jury had evidence from near misses, people who had had drugs administered by Port, and the jury could hear live evidence of what effect it had on those victims.
After a 7-week trial, Port was found guilty of murdering all 4 men and multiple sexual assaults. He was later sentenced to a whole life tariff without parole.
There was lots of tears, lots of hugs, lots of relief, all the emotions you can think of, really. I mean, this man, I don't want to call him a man, he's not a man, but it will die in prison. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
The judge told Stephen Port that he carried out the murders to satisfy his lust for sex with men he'd rendered unconscious, describing his attempt to cover up 2 of the murders as wicked and monstrous.
A bittersweet moment for the families. On the one hand, they're getting justice, but on the other hand, as each case unravelled, they would have seen significant shortcomings in the police investigation.
The way we loosely put it was, look, we're going to have to sue the police afterwards. We know it won't bring him back, but people have to be held accountable.
Would their boys still be alive if their concerns had been taken seriously, if the police had investigated properly? The families of Stephen Port's victims hoping, finally, for answers as the inquests into their deaths open this morning.
It's very important that these inquests happen and that the police had to submit themselves, essentially, to the scrutiny of open justice.
The inadequate investigation by the Metropolitan Police into the deaths of Anthony, Gabriel, Daniel and Jack should be on public record as one of the most widespread constitutional failings in modern history.
The police's primary position appeared to be that they were operating within a very tight budgetary system with a reduction in staffing, that this was not institutional prejudice, but it was gross incompetence.
After 2 months of hearing the evidence, an inquest jury determined that the deaths of Gabriel, Daniel and Jack could probably have been prevented had the initial investigations by the Met been better.
It is a devastating finding. Our thoughts are with everybody who loved these young men. We are so sorry for their loss. I give my own and the Met's heartfelt apologies. It's very important now to show that we are trustworthy, that we care, that we have changed and that we are learning, so that we can work with every person and every community to help protect them.
It's one of the only cases I've ever seen where I've tried to play devil's advocate for the police in my head, and it just falls flat every time. It's astounding how badly wrong Barking and Dagenham police got this.
I think you have to pay credit to the families because they persevered. If it hadn't been for their actions, Stephen Port would have carried on committing offences.
A single mother with a big heart.
If you needed anything, she was always there.
She was a sweet girl. Everybody loved her.
Is the victim of a bizarre murder.
Duct tape had been wrapped around her head about 14 times.
This is nothing I had ever seen before or even heard of before.
Leaving her young son as the only witness.
A 4-year-old child had been just mere feet away, his mother being killed.
Investigators focus on the men in her life.
This guy, he wouldn't look at us. He was more nervous than normal.
And that polygraph test, he passed. It was frustrating as hell.
She was using Norma's house for these sexual liaisons.
To unveil a killer hiding in plain sight.
Of everyone we dealt with, he was maybe the coolest customer of the bunch.
People didn't see that inner demon. He was an unexpected killer.
It just blows you away.
Port Hueneme, California, a peaceful beach town on the Pacific coast.
It's a hidden gem. Port Hueneme is about 60 miles north of LA. It's a completely different environment. It's a lot more relaxed.
It's a quiet town, and it's a town that has, for a long time, a ridiculously low crime rate and very rarely a homicide.
But the tranquility of the seaside community is shattered one summer morning when police get an urgent call.
On June 1st, 1993, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, our dispatch received a call of a possible homicide.
An ex-husband had called up and said that his ex-wife had been murdered.
We hadn't had a homicide in over 3 years. It took me a second to realize, okay, this is real.
Detectives arrive to begin the investigation, but nothing can prepare them for the scene inside.
I got inside the house, and then it was like, oh my God. This is just too bizarre for words. She's laying on the floor, head encased in duct tape. It had been partially cut away, but it appeared as though someone had tried to wrap her like a mummy.
It went from the top of her forehead to the chin.
It was just incredibly strange. This is nothing I had ever seen before or even heard of before.
And some rigor mortis had set in the back portion of her body because she was laying on the back. Usually rigor mortis takes a number of hours to show up. We estimated that the victim probably died in the early morning hours. When I saw that duct tape, the first thing that entered my mind was this was somebody she knew. Whoever did it didn't want to have her look at them while they were committing the crime.
Looking to unravel the mystery of this bizarre murder, detectives turn to the victim's ex-husband, who claims to have discovered the body.
At the house, the ex-husband was there, his brother was there, and 2 younger sons were there.
The ex-husband, Tony, identifies the victim as 32-year-old Norma Rodriguez, mother to 2 boys, Andrew, 11 years old, and Austin, 4 years old.
Tony, he said that he had come over to the house to pick up the kids to take them to school, which was his regular practice.
The 2 boys were still asleep in their beds when Tony realized what had happened to their mother. He told them to stay in their room until police arrived.
Tony, his brother Hector, and the 2 sons were transported to the Port Hueneme Police Department, where they were going to be interviewed separately. Tony and Hector were first at the house, and we needed to determine what happened.
Police continue to comb through the house looking for clues.
It was not a scene of extreme violence. There wasn't blood anywhere. There weren't a lot of things overturned.
In the bedroom, we located her purse, and it was intact. There wasn't anything that seemed to be missing.
This was not like a burglary that had gone wrong.
There's no sign of forced entry into the home. Then, something else catches the detective's eye.
I noticed a set of keys that were on the floor. They were in an unusual location, close to her body. We checked and confirmed they were Norma's house keys.
But why were Norma's keys lying next to her body? As investigators finish processing the scene, Norma's sister, Aurelia, arrives.
I was supposed to pick her up because we were going to go looking for a car for her. And I had been calling her and calling her. And I drove to her house. That's when I saw the yellow tape. I saw the police department there, and that's what they told me would happen. In my worst nightmares, did I ever think that this would happen to my sister? It is horrible, horrible.
Norma Rodriguez was born and raised in rural Texas.
We're 7 sisters and 1 brother. She was the middle child, and, I was really close to Norma. She was very quiet, very reserved, a very big heart. If you needed anything, she was always there.
I first met Norma in 1975 in junior high school. We were 14 years old, and we became friends right away. Well, we used to hang out together and just go everywhere together. She could be feisty, but she was a sweet girl. Everybody loved her.
After high school, Norma moved to Oxnard, California for college and soon fell for another student named Tony.
She loved him. She just loved being with him.
Their college romance became more serious, and 2 years later in 1982, Tony popped the question. They soon had their first son, Andrew, and their second son, Austin, arrived 7 years later.
She was just a great mom. Norma was very devoted to her boys. Her boys were her life.
But in 1991, after almost 10 years together, Tony and Norma's marriage became strained.
Tony was really never around.
She was getting into arguments and fights with Tony, asking him to provide for them. She realized it would be an easier life for her if she just went on her own without Tony. And that's what she did.
Later that year, Norma moved with her sons to the neighboring town of Port Hueneme. She got a job at a local retail store and started a new chapter in her life.
Being a single mom, people might think that's a hard job, but she enjoyed it. And it was hard for her, but she was happy.
Who would want to take the life of this loving mother, and in such a bizarre way? Later that day, at police headquarters, detectives begin to interview Norma's ex-husband, Tony Rodriguez, and his brother, Hector.
As the first two parties to the scene, the investigators had to look at them.
The detectives asked Tony about how he found Norma earlier that day.
Tony, he said that he had knocked on the door, but Norma didn't answer. Sons Andrew and Austin were asleep. The door was locked, so then he used a credit card in order to slip the lock, and he was able to open the front door.
When Tony and Hector entered the living room, they saw Norma lying on the floor, her face wrapped in duct tape.
Hector told us that he cut the tape because they didn't know whether she was deceased or not, and they wanted to try to make it easier for her to breathe. He's the one that had the scissors in his possession, and he's the one that decided to cut the tape off of her face.
We thought, wow, that's a little strange. Why is this guy doing this? Why is he messing up our evidence? You know, Hector told us that the body was still somewhat warm. And that didn't make sense because by that time she had full rigor mortis. I mean, she had obviously been deceased for a number of hours. I just wasn't buying it.
Investigators are skeptical. Is Hector misleading police because the two men have something to hide? They hone in on Tony and Hector as possible suspects.
We don't know these people. We don't know what they're capable of.
Tony and Hector are suspicious, and Tony, being Norma's ex, he was right at the top of our list.
Coming up, detectives broaden their hunt for a possible killer.
We've got countless potential witnesses, countless potential suspects, interviews with co-workers.
We didn't know who it was. I just wanted him off the streets.
Investigators suspect a love interest from Norma's past has something to hide.
It was a brief but intense relationship.
It was that selfishness, that narcissistic quality that would cause him to end someone else's life.
And what police uncover shocks everyone.
All this time, were we dealing with a true sociopath and, you know, couldn't see it?
Mother of two, Norma Rodriguez, has been found murdered with her head wrapped in duct tape. Less than 24 hours into the investigation, detectives are interviewing their first suspect, starting with her ex-husband, Tony Rodriguez.
In a case like this, statistics will show you that an overwhelming amount of the time, it's going to be that significant other or former significant other who ends up being your suspect.
Investigators ask Tony about his relationship with Norma in the weeks leading up to her death.
At the time, Tony said that they had been separated for a couple of years. I don't believe they had filed for divorce yet, but they were living separately, and Tony had visitation rights. They weren't close friends anymore, but they tried to maintain the friendship for the boys.
But police have a different account from Norma's family.
We learned that shortly before the homicide, there were some conflicts.
Norma, she was upset at the fact that he would come make excuses to come over with the boys, but he would end up wanting to stay there. You know, she used to complain about that. I said, don't let him in. He doesn't have the right to come into your house. And she was a little timid when it came down to Tony.
According to loved ones, Tony couldn't accept that Norma was moving on. Detectives press him about his whereabouts in the hours surrounding Norma's murder.
Tony said that on May the 30th, early afternoon, he talked with Norma and asked if our son Andrew could stay with him. Tony had tickets to an Angels game the next day, and so they agreed that that was okay.
Tony says Andrew was dropped back home the next night. At the time, Tony never entered the house. He found Norma's body the next day. Did Norma's ex innocently walk into the crime scene that morning, or had something more sinister happened?
The potential motive with him was he wanted the kids. Maybe one thing led to another, and he lost control.
In a room nearby, police questioned Tony's brother Hector, since he was with him when Norma's body was found. They ask where he and Tony went after dropping Norma's son at his mom's.
Hector, he said that they had been at his residence with other family members in the city of Oxnard. And when we interviewed those family members, they corroborated what Tony and Hector told us.
Knowing their alibis are far from concrete, detectives ask Tony and Hector to take polygraph tests.
The results of the tests were that they were being honest in stating that they did not know anything about the homicide.
With no hard evidence to hold them, investigators are forced to let the two men go. News of Norma's death quickly spreads through the small community.
When I found out about her being murdered like that, I had told my cousin that I had just talked to her. It can't be true because I just talked to her. It was true.
At the police station, detectives received the results of the autopsy.
The cause of death was established as manual strangulation. Norma wasn't a tiny woman. Whoever did this had to possess significant upper body strength.
Some important details emerge about the duct tape.
The length of it was approximately 20 feet and had been wrapped around her head about 14 times.
The duct tape was examined and there were skin cells that were discovered. But in 1993, DNA technology was in its infancy. You had to have a fairly significant sample size in order to potentially get a result from it. In Norma's case, they didn't have nearly enough in these samples.
To find out who did this, we have to dig deeper.
Searching for new leads, detectives hope Norma's 11-year-old son, Andrew, can help. With Tony's consent, the detectives talk with him at the station.
When you're interviewing any type of a witness, it's a difficult process. And you have to understand that when you're interviewing a child, it's extremely difficult. We interviewed Andrew, and we just wanted to try to get as much information as we could from the date of the homicide. Andrew had gone to a baseball game with his father and his uncle. Later at night, Andrew was dropped off at the house, and the house was dark.
Andrew walked up to the front door, found it was locked. He went around to his bedroom, saw that the window was open, and crawled in.
Then, Andrew shares a disturbing detail told to him by his younger brother.
When Andrew came into the bedroom, 4-year-old Austin had said, "Mommy has a Band-Aid on her face." That didn't register immediately with Andrew, and so he went to bed. And it wasn't until morning that Andrew found out exactly what Austin meant by a Band-Aid. It just ripped at your heart knowing that a 4-year-old child had been just mere feet away from his mother being killed. And at one point he had come out, he had seen his mother's body. That just ripped at me a lot.
What else had Norma's youngest son, Austin, seen? Detectives decide to speak to the 4-year-old.
At first he was withdrawn. He really didn't want to talk about it, which was understandable. I knew that because he's 4 years old, and I couldn't have gone on much longer than I did. And I knew that I needed to stop. But then he mentioned a man by the name of Corey.
He brought up the name Corey as someone who was over at the house at that time. Now we've got this person who might end up being our prime suspect.
But who was Corey? Had he killed Norma? Did the single mom's youngest son just solve her murder?
We've got to run it down as far as it goes.
Police are investigating the bizarre murder of single mother Norma Rodriguez. Her youngest son, Austin, says he saw a man named Corey at their home around the time of the murder.
At that time, we had no idea who Corey was, but it was something that had to be checked out.
Detectives learn from the family that Corey could be Corey Davis, one of Norma's co-workers. So they head to her workplace.
First step was find out, to what extent Corey knew Norma, if they socialized, if they were friends away from work, and so forth.
Corey was more nervous than normal. In talking with him, he wouldn't look at us. He kept staring down, not tuning in or paying attention.
Corey's unusual behavior during their conversation alarms investigators.
He did not like being talked to and having to answer anything.
They question Corey about his relationship with Norma.
He stated that he would interact with Norma at work, but they weren't that close with each other, and they didn't have any interactions beyond that.
Detectives want to know if he was at Norma's house near the time of her murder, as young Austin claimed.
He made it pretty clear that he wasn't at the house at that time. Instead, he said the night of the homicide he was at home. The only people who were there at home with him were his parents. We needed to find out how much of what he was telling us was, provably true.
While officers are sent to check Corey's alibi, detectives speak to Norma's other coworkers, starting with her friend, Beatrice.
Beatrice came to Norma's house on Sunday, the day before the homicide. Norma had a get-together, a small barbecue at her house for several of her coworkers.
Police ask Beatrice if she remembers anything unusual about the day of the barbecue.
Beatrice said that while she was there, suddenly Norma can't find her keys anymore. And they ended up searching all over Norma's house, trying to figure out what happened to Norma's keys.
They didn't find them, and then they're laying beside her body, beside her house at the time she's found. We figured someone had taken her keys, and that's how they were able to enter the house.
It's a significant lead. Does this mean the killer stole the keys at Norma's barbecue? Detectives renew their focus on her inner circle.
From everything we knew, this was a pretty personal crime. We had a certain confidence that the killer knew Norma.
At the police station, investigators discover information they received from Corey Davis has some holes.
One of the things we do with everyone is we find out what their addresses are, their date of birth, everything else. And with Corey Davis, one of the things we noticed was that his address he gave us was not the address that where he was actually living. So there was a discrepancy there.
Why would Corey withhold that information from detectives? They wonder what else he's hiding.
But at this point in time, Corey jumped out at us as this is the one we need to concentrate on.
Police bring Corey in for an interview, but he's far from helpful.
He's like, I don't want to be involved in this. Well, I understand that, but like it or not, you are part of this case. If you want to be eliminated from the suspect pool, the best way to do that is to cooperate with us.
Detectives share details of the crime with Corey to observe his reaction.
With the information that we were giving to him, he was obviously upset, and he took it really hard.
Corey denies any involvement in Norma's death. They ask him to take a polygraph test.
He submitted to the test, and he passed.
All detectives have tying Corey to the crime scene is a statement from Norma's 4-year-old son. But police know he could be mistaken, given his young age and traumatic experience.
At that point, Corey worked his way down the ladder of possible suspects dramatically.
1 week into the investigation, detectives are out of leads. They look at who else was at Norma's barbecue the day before she was killed. Friends tell them about a former coworker named Warren Mackey.
Warren Mackey was a previous co-worker of Norma's, and also he lived in fairly close proximity to her.
Warren and Norma hit it off and became friends.
They worked together for a while, and the work relationship became a social relationship. And it appeared that Warren had something more than just a friendship interest in Norma.
I remember Norma telling me that there was a guy there that she used to work with, and he was always trying to talk to her and trying to ask her out.
Talking to Norma's coworkers, detectives learned that Warren pursued Norma, but she wasn't interested in him romantically.
Norma told Beatrice and some of the other people that she felt that Warren wanted more than to be friends, and that she wasn't interested in that. She tried to curtail any attempts that he may have made to ask her out. Some of the employees that we talked with felt that Warren wasn't real pleased with that. He liked Norma, and that he wanted the relationship a little bit more than what it was.
But Norma still tried to maintain their friendship.
She noticed he was kind of like an outcast, just very private. So she tried to include him in the group. She didn't want to leave him out.
As detectives look closer at the quiet coworker, the information they uncover is concerning.
Started picking up little details about him at that point. There were some people who said, yeah, good guy, he was okay to work with. But there were enough people who pointed out that he was a little weird and had made some overtures to Norma, enough to make us want to look into this a little further.
But did Warren's workplace crush make him a killer?
The nature of the relationship was of interest to us. We're going to have a conversation with Warren Mackey.
Police investigating the murder of single mother Norma Rodriguez are questioning her former coworker, Warren Mackey. Detectives have learned that Warren may have been more than a doting colleague. They're trying to determine if he's connected to this brutal crime.
In our first encounter with Warren Mackey, there was nothing that seemed overtly suspicious or evasive or anything about him.
Detectives ask Warren about his feelings for Norma.
The impression that Warren Mackey gave us was that, his relationship with Norma Rodriguez was pretty casual. They didn't see quite as much of each other because they were no longer working with each other, but they socialized a lot.
Warren said that they were close, but it was only a close friendship. He never had romantic feelings for Norma.
He had tried to present himself to Norma as someone to lean on, someone to talk to. I'm here for you.
But investigators aren't fully buying it.
We felt that Warren liked Norma and that he wanted to make the relationship closer than it already was.
Then, Warren reveals a detail that grabs investigators' attention.
He had helped out Norma with, a couple little things around the house. And one of the things that he mentioned was that the kids had a small basketball hoop and it had somehow gotten broken and that he had fixed it. And what really kind of set off an alarm was the fact that he had fixed it with duct tape.
This is the first time in the investigation that anybody's mentioned duct tape or someone possessing duct tape.
Detectives drilled down on when Warren last saw Norma.
Warren said that he had been in the presence of Norma at the barbecue the day before the homicide. By the time things had wrapped up for the evening, it was essentially just him and Norma there, and they had just kicked back and watched TV for a while. This made him one of the last people who could have or would have seen Norma alive.
Had the former coworker made advances on Norma, then attacked her when she turned him down? Detectives ask where Warren was on the night of the murder.
Warren said that on May the 31st, close to Norma's homicide, he and his roommate and his roommate's girlfriend, they went to a nightclub in Santa Barbara till about 1:30, and then they came back to where they were living at in Oxnard. They talked for a short while, and then everybody went to bed. We drove to Oxnard, and we ended up talking with his roommate and her girlfriend who had gone with him for the night, and they corroborated his story as far as them going to Santa Barbara, closing the nightclub, and then getting back probably between 1:30 and 2 in the morning.
Could Warren have had time to drive to Port Hueneme and kill Norma after arriving home from a late night out with friends? Warren agrees to take a polygraph.
And he passed it, stating that he knew nothing about the homicide and he knew no one who would have killed her.
With nothing concrete tying him to the crime, police let Warren go. But before he leaves, Warren remembers Norma had problems with a man she was dating almost a year ago, named Daniel Garcia.
As the investigation continued, We started interviewing a number of people about Daniel. We found out that Daniel Garcia was Norma's boyfriend for a short period of time.
They met at a party. Norma had a strong attraction to the charming mechanic.
It was a brief but intense relationship, lasted a few months.
She told me about Daniel, that she really cared about him a lot. You know, they would do fun things together, and she always had a good time with him.
Friends tell police Daniel ended the relationship, blindsiding Norma.
Daniel had approached Norma and essentially told her that he wanted to go back with a former girlfriend. But Norma was affected quite a bit by the breakup.
Then, detectives learned that the relationship was turbulent.
There was some fraying in the relationship, and there were some conflicts. Now, that sends up some big red flags. There was one co-worker who mentioned that they had witnessed a fairly heated argument between Norma and Daniel.
Daniel came in while she was working. For whatever reason it started, they had a verbal altercation that was witnessed by other people. It shows there was hostile feelings on the part of Daniel Garcia.
When detectives dig deeper into Daniel and Norma's relationship, they learn he visited Norma at home about 2 weeks before her murder.
Norma confided to her close friend she was involved with him before her death.
With a history of conflict in the relationship, did an argument turn deadly?
This is big. Any big fight that went on, that was problematic.
Detectives are closing in on their new suspect.
This could be our guy. We have to find out if he could have committed this crime.
The investigation into the murder of single mother Norma Rodriguez is heating up. Police have a new suspect in their sights, an ex-boyfriend, Daniel Garcia.
One of the things that we learned about the relationship between Daniel and Norma was that there were some conflicts. That sends up some red flags.
Daniel agrees to come to the police station for questioning.
Norma really had no confrontations. She was very mild-mannered. The fact that she was getting into verbal altercations was unusual.
When detectives ask Daniel about his relationship with Norma, he denies any problems.
Daniel said that he wanted to go back with a former girlfriend. And so they broke up and went their separate ways. But they were still able to be somewhat friends, and he would stop by on occasion.
Detectives confront him about the heated argument with Norma at her workplace almost a year earlier.
At the time, Norma learned that he had other relationships, and it was a problem. She was pretty upset by that.
She still had feelings for Daniel.
Had Norma attempted to restart their relationship, but instead wound up in a fight that spiraled out of control.
During his interview, Daniel told us that he saw Norma but didn't have an argument.
Detectives asked Daniel where he was the night Norma was killed.
He stated that he was at home with other family members watching TV, and then he went to bed. We talked with other family members, and that alibi was corroborated, but family members will lie for other family members. Sometimes they won't be perfectly honest with what they know, and it's extremely difficult to put weight on that.
Like previous suspects, Daniel is subjected to a polygraph.
And he passed.
With no evidence connecting the ex-lover to the crime, police let him go. It's another disappointing dead end.
After a couple of weeks of going through this, talking to countless potential witnesses, countless potential suspects, neighborhood canvasses, interviews with co-workers, polygraph examinations, it was frustrating as hell.
That was really, really hard on my family. We did not have an answer to who killed Norma. I just wanted not only justice for Norma, I was very concerned for any woman out there. We didn't know who it was. It could be someone that just passed me by. I didn't know. I just wanted him off the streets.
1 month into the investigation, the pressure continues to mount on police to solve the case.
We would get calls from the media every day. Every place we went in the community, they would ask us what was going on, you know, and it was a lot of pressure.
Then, a surprising development. Norma's family contacts police with new information about Beatrice, Norma's coworker and friend.
It turns out that Beatrice was having an affair, and she was using Norma's house as a location for these sexual liaisons. Norma knew about it and in fact condoned it and gave her a copy of her house key.
But why hadn't Beatrice disclosed this detail to police earlier?
We confronted Beatrice with this information. Initially, huge wave of embarrassment. But she laid it out on the line. She told us, you know, the when, the how many times.
Detectives question whether the secret rendezvous led to Norma's murder.
Now we've got other people who had, you know, either continued access to the house. Previously, they were on the periphery of this case. Now they've moved right to the center of it.
One person detectives immediately turn to is Beatrice's husband, who also knew Norma. Had he gone after Norma for helping his wife have a secret affair?
And now, suddenly, Beatrice's husband, he's potentially in the suspect pool. We have to find out if he has an alibi and if we can corroborate it.
He apparently didn't know his wife was having an extramarital affair in Norma's house.
That was not the most comfortable thing to do from an investigative standpoint, but it still had to be done. And, you know, the guy was crushed. He was absolutely crushed.
Detectives question Beatrice's husband about his whereabouts on the night of Norma's murder.
He told us that he had been at work late that evening. We talked to a lot of his coworkers. Everything about this man was genuine.
6 months into the investigation of the murder of Norma Rodriguez, detectives worry the trail has gone cold.
We're no closer to narrowing it down than we were on day one.
This case was very mind-boggling. You build up things that, wow, this is going to be great, it's coming together, and then it falls apart. As time progressed, the lead started falling off. It was tough. It was really tough.
Months turn to years. For nearly a decade, the case is at a standstill. But Norma's family doesn't give up.
Every year, we would call the police department for any updates, any new leads or anything. We kept it active. We didn't want this case forgotten.
During this entire investigation, I had the picture of Norma Rodriguez on my desk. I swore to her that I would never give up trying to find out who was responsible.
Then, 10 years to the day Norma was killed. An astonishing break in the case.
Worker with a crime lab. He had a lot of the evidence that we secured in the Norma homicide. He called me and he says, we have a match. We have a match on the DNA.
My head just like exploded with 1,000 thoughts. It was just nuts.
I remember receiving the phone call and it was like winning the lottery.
It's been 10 years since 32-year-old Norma Rodriguez was found in her home, strangled and wrapped in duct tape. The case has remained unsolved, with all leads turning out to be dead ends, until now. With advancements in DNA technology, evidence collected a decade ago has finally yielded results.
At the time of the autopsy of Norma Rodriguez, there were a number of samples that were taken. Hair samples, blood samples, and fingernail clippings.
The crime lab said we have a match on the DNA, and it comes back to Warren Mackey.
Warren, Norma's friend and former coworker who had previously passed a polygraph and had an alibi for the night of the murder. At the time of the investigation, Warren had submitted his DNA and was cooperative.
Of everyone we dealt with, he was maybe the coolest customer of the bunch. it just blows you away.
Investigators start putting the pieces together about Warren Mackey.
If you're dealing with someone who's a true sociopath, they can get past the polygraph test. So now I'm thinking, all this time, were we dealing with a true sociopath and, couldn't see it?
We just went into high gear. We started unraveling everything again and doing what we needed to do.
Detectives start building a case based on forensics.
They evaluated DNA that we had gotten off of Norma's body, and we found Warren's DNA under Norma's fingernails.
The DNA evidence is a major breakthrough, but to build an airtight case, they want more.
The single biggest piece of physical evidence we had at the time was the duct tape. So it got sent off and it got tested.
The DNA that was obtained within the multiple layers of the duct tape was returned to Warren Mackey.
The odds of the DNA match being from someone else besides Warren Mackey was 1 in 810 billion. So we felt pretty confident that this was our person.
Investigators pieced together the events that led up to Norma's murder.
I think this was the classic case of a jilted suitor. And my guess is that he just got a flat-out rejection. He built up his expectations to a point where he couldn't take the fall.
Investigators believe in the early hours of May 31st, Warren Mackey entered Norma's home using keys he had stolen from her purse at the barbecue the day before.
According to Norma's son Andrew, the house was dark. Many times she would fall asleep watching TV. Maybe she fell asleep on the couch. She had no idea what was about to happen.
Detectives believe that's when Warren strangled Norma.
In his mind, she needed to die because she shouldn't have rejected him.
Then Warren wrapped her head in duct tape.
Trying to depersonalize the scene and covered her face so that he wouldn't see it.
And he ripped that duct tape, handling both ends of the duct tape, wrapped it completely around her face, and left.
Police also believe Norma's 4-year-old son, Austin, was in the next room, not realizing his mother had been murdered.
Austin didn't process, because he was a very small child, that he was too young to process what had happened. An absolute nightmare.
After Warren kills Norma, he returns to his place in nearby Oxnard, as if nothing happened.
I believe that Warren Mackey was the type of person who felt that if I can't have her, nobody can. I think this was one sick individual who had no value for life. He had no right to do what he did.
On August 28, 2003, Ventura County investigators arrest Warren Mackey for the first-degree murder of Norma Rodriguez. Warren pleads not guilty.
During the subsequent 10 years, Warren had settled down. He had gotten married, had a job, was living a very stable life. His friends, neighbors said that he was a nice, caring man.
And for him to live 10 years after that and not even have any remorse, that is not human. I can't imagine what is in a person's head to even hurt another human in that way.
Then, on January 10, 2005, as investigators prepare for trial, the DA receives an unexpected call. Warren Mackey has changed his plea to guilty.
Warren Mackey is an unexpected killer because people didn't see that inner demon, that selfishness, that narcissistic quality that would cause him to end someone else's life. People just didn't see him that way, but he was that way, and he is that way.
On March 28, 2005, Warren Mackey is sentenced to 15 years to life for the murder of Norma Rodriguez.
Oh, it was phenomenal. It was such a an elation. You felt like this weight being lifted.
At the end of the day, we achieved closure for the family, but there's never going to be complete closure.
The devastating loss of the vibrant single mother will forever be felt by her loved ones.
I think about Norma a lot. She was having a good life, and he took it away from her.
It still hurts like it happened yesterday. I miss her in my life. That wound does not heal. We just put it in the back burner. We have to live for Norma, and we have to go forward.
A selfless and caring single mother.
She just loved life.
Dana would help in any way she could.
Is ruthlessly killed in her own home.
There was a great deal of damage to her throat.
It was a rather brutal attack.
And it would have taken somebody very, very strong to have done that kind of damage.
Leaving a family devastated.
I cried every night.
You just can't fathom it. You can't comprehend it.
Police uncover a deadly obsession.
She was being stalked by this guy.
He had become violent.
He was a heavy drug user.
To expose a killer closer than expected.
How is that possible? Someone that Dana was trying to help. That had to be a huge betrayal.
Every time they looked at an obvious suspect, that person had an alibi.
What I was told completely changed everything.
That was quite a shock.
I couldn't believe it.
It was all a bunch of lies.
Puyallup, Washington, a charming and peaceful town at the foot of Mount Rainier.
The city of Puyallup is about 30 miles south of Seattle, 6 miles east of Tacoma.
It's just a nice little town. It's a community, a lot of families, parks.
Has a small town feel to it. There's a lot of small businesses. The downtown area is easily walkable. It's a terrific little community.
The tranquility is shattered in August 2001 when police get a call from a worried couple who cannot reach their nanny, Dana Laskowski, even after several attempts to contact her.
We got a call from Dana's employers that she hadn't shown up for work. Her employers assured us it was very unusual for Dana to not show up.
An officer is sent to Dana's home to investigate and arrives at 11 a.m., 3 full hours after she was expected to arrive for work.
The officer arrived. He knocked on the front, knocked on the back door, and found the back door ajar. He walked in the back door, walked through the kitchen and through the house, and found an adult female who's deceased on the couch in the living room.
Working off a general description, the officer identifies the victim as Dana Laskowski. The crime scene is secured until detectives from Puyallup PD arrive.
When we found her on the couch, we see the position of her body, and that's unusual. Her one arm is underneath her head, her other arm is behind her back. She's twisted so that her waist is at an awkward angle. The awkward twist to her body is something that we don't normally see in a natural death scene. It just has a sense that it's a murder. We saw abrasions to the neck, and there was a small pool of blood at her mouth. We did see abrasions on her elbows and knees.
The investigator's suspicions are confirmed. Dana was murdered.
What it looked like was a strangulation that occurred on the couch, and then the offender simply left her in the position that we found her.
Forensic technicians searched the living room for evidence.
Primarily, the items that we collected were either hair or fibers, and then extensively processed for fingerprints. When we were processing the carpet, we discovered blood trail or spatter of some sort.
The locations of those were believed to be consistent with the struggle.
Investigators continue their work throughout the rest of the home.
It looked to me like the house had been ransacked. It had a feel that it had been searched, where someone was looking for something. We discovered a basement window that had appeared to have been recently broken, and it was possibly a point of entry.
One of the first things we're going to wonder is, was the victim murdered by a burglar that broke into her house during the night? Or was the murderer somebody that she had invited over the house?
As they wrap up their work at the scene, detectives contact Dana's family to deliver the tragic news.
My son phoned me, and I said, yeah, and he said, Dana's dead. That was it. I was pretty much in shock, and I said, tell me one more time, say what you said, because I didn't want to believe it. You can't imagine that, because, you know, there was no reason.
Born in 1965, Dana's childhood was filled with joy.
She was the happiest kid in the world. So it was so easy. She just loved life.
Dana was also creative, a special bond she shared with her father, Bill, an award-winning artist.
She was always making things. She was artistic, like me, and was interested in what I did and wanted to help. So we were close.
Just being around her, you felt her energy. You felt her enthusiasm and her zest for living each moment.
As she grew older, Dana developed a nurturing spirit.
She was babysitting from the time she was very young, and she loved the kids, and she always wanted to have a daycare.
In 1989, Dana met Sam and fell in love. The couple married quickly, but from the start, there were complications.
She was having trouble getting pregnant.
In 1993, after years of fertility treatments, Dana's wish of starting a family finally came true.
She was so excited when she found out she was pregnant, because that's what she really wanted all her life, and it was a pretty exciting time.
Dana's delight only grew when she discovered they were having triplets.
She loved the kids, because then she could bake and she could make things and do art. She loved it, she really did.
But by 2000, after 11 years of marriage, the stress of parenting took its toll on their relationship.
Dana told me that she had moved and that they were separated.
As a single mom, Dana worked hard to provide a good home for her triplets. Dana cared deeply about family, and especially for her troubled 17-year-old niece, Amanda, with whom she was very close.
Dana would do anything for Amanda.
Amanda loved Dana, because, you know, Dana was kind of this flashy, artistic type person, and Amanda loved all that too.
Dana was a very kind, caring person, loved her family. Amanda was a frequent runaway. So Dana wanted to guide Amanda out of risky behavior, away from drugs, away from the runaway lifestyle.
Amanda had a rough relationship with her parents, so would often turn to her favorite aunt.
By all accounts, she was the kind of the cool aunt that you could go and actually tell the truth to about your problems. No judgment, just help.
Dana soon became a surrogate mom to Amanda and her best friend, Emily Lauenborg.
Food, showers, a warm place to stay, money. Dana would open her heart and her home to help in any way she could.
She was a mentor and also a friend.
Dana had an open door policy and would always welcome Amanda's friends to her home.
She was very comfortable at her age being amongst teenagers as though they were her peers.
Just everybody loved her.
But now, all that is left is loss and unanswered questions.
For us to lose Dana was so hard.
Losing a child is probably the worst thing that can ever happen. And, she shouldn't have died before me.
Who would want this loving and generous spirit dead? And why?
This murder was very unusual. Right from the start, we had a lot of things that needed to be done in order to find the killer.
Back at the station, detectives start reaching out to those closest to Dana. They begin with her ex-husband, Sam, who they learn has the triplets staying with him.
As the ex-husband, Sam, is a person of interest and the first person we needed to look at. But we couldn't find him. The fact that he was missing, this is significant to us. We have to find him.
Coming up, investigators uncover a dark obsession.
He had kind of gotten fixated on her, and he didn't really take no for an answer.
And alarming secrets.
In the journal, it said 10 things I want to do before I die, and one of those 10 things was kill somebody and get away with it.
That point to a killer no one would ever suspect.
I felt what he was telling me was not possible.
You just can't comprehend that it's real.
And the truth is finally revealed.
That's about as close to a confession as you're going to get.
Police investigating the murder of mother of three, Dana Laskowski, are trying to track down her estranged husband, Sam, when suddenly they receive a surprise call.
Sam actually reached out to the police to try to find out what had happened. Sam, it turned out he had taken his kids camping and away from his phone and away from contact. And so when he got back to civilization, he had all these messages that Dana was murdered.
So we went up to interview Sam, Dana's ex. And so when we confirmed that Dana was murdered, Sam was upset. He would respond to all of our questions, but he's just not the kind of person that elaborates. As we were talking to Sam, we noticed he did have some abrasions on his knees, and that's unusual. We asked him about that, and he said they were from playing baseball. It was baseball season.
Detectives press Sam about his feelings toward Dana.
When asked about his relationship with Dana, Sam described it as they were estranged, but they co-parented their kids, and they've had arguments, but overall, they were trying to make it work.
Sam and Dana just grew apart.
When she moved away, she was so excited. I think it made her feel good about knowing that she could be independent, and I think that was important for her to be able to do that on her own.
We just felt that Sam was mad at Dana for having relocated 3 hours away and had split the family, and the hopes of having a family and a marriage were dashed and destroyed.
Was that enough to push Sam over the edge and harm Dana?
Based on the information that we had about her ending her time with her husband and becoming estranged, we thought Sam had possibly come over to discuss something that has to do with custody, and they'd gotten into a fight, and the fight resulted in Dana's death.
Police ask Sam where he was the night of Dana's murder.
Sam said that he had left his kids at his home and he went and got gas. He showed us a receipt for that gas. He said the next day he went camping with the triplets.
Detectives believe Dana was killed sometime between midnight and 7 a.m., but Sam cannot corroborate where he was at that particular time.
There wasn't an ironclad alibi. He didn't have 3 adults who would be able to say he was with us all night. There were kids, they were sleeping. It was not impossible for Sam to have left the kids and come back to Dana's house and committed the murder.
And we looked at the possibility that he filled up his gas tank, drove to Puyallup, killed Dana, and then drove back to the kids at the home.
Investigators press Sam further.
Sam denied killing Dana. When we approached Sam for his fingerprints and his DNA, he was not necessarily agreeable or cooperative, didn't like the idea that he was a potential suspect. He certainly didn't like the idea that we thought that he might be responsible for her murder.
Sam didn't really want to cooperate with requests for DNA and hair samples.
Sam's behavior may be suspicious, but police have no concrete evidence to tie him to the murder.
You can't charge someone with a crime just because their alibi isn't ironclad. You can't charge them with a crime because they can't prove they were someplace else. You have to prove that they committed that crime. There has to be evidence at the scene that connects the person to the crime. And so in this particular case, they didn't have that with Sam.
While police seek hard evidence against Sam, Dana's autopsy results come in.
The results were that she had died of strangulation.
The cause of death was a fracture of the cricoid cartilage in her throat.
There was a great deal of damage to her throat, her windpipe, and it would have taken somebody very, very strong to have done that kind of damage.
We were going to be looking for an offender who had upper body strength and prone to flying into a rage. Because of the fracture of the cricoid cartilage, it takes a great deal of strength. And a strangulation itself takes a very committed attack. The victim generally fights back. And then the attacker has to double down on the strangulation while the victim is struggling back.
Just to think that Dana struggled and fought for her life, it's just wrong. It's all wrong.
Looking for new leads, detectives turn to Dana's niece.
Police contacted Amanda as she was a relative and somebody who knew the victim. And what Amanda said was that Dana was the kind of person where she could go over, do the laundry, maybe get a little bit of money. That was who she was, and that's how she helped out Amanda. And she didn't know what had happened or who would want to murder her aunt.
Detectives also speak to the couple who employed Dana as a nanny. When asked if they knew of anyone who might want to harm Dana, their answer is chilling.
Dana's employers told us that Dana was being stalked by this guy. Her employers told us that Dana had said that if anything happened to her, he'd be the one. And that was significant to us because I'm looking for a killer.
Police investigating the strangling of Dana Laskowski have been told that she was being harassed by a stalker. Could he be her killer?
Dana's employers told us that Dana was afraid of this Patrick. Patrick was a guy that installed cable in Dana's area. He liked her.
Dana had told her sister-in-law and her employer he had kind of gotten fixated on her. Dana, by accounts, let him know that she wasn't interested.
Police learned that Patrick had been trying to contact Dana for over a month straight, and that his pursuit had become even more intense.
Patrick was leaving notes and flowers on her back porch. He wrote some notes that were like poems.
Then, the messages took a disturbing turn.
Dana's friends told the investigators he left her a note letting her know that he had been observing her and seen her doing things inside her home that he wouldn't know unless he was observing her.
Dana mentioned that she was concerned about someone possibly watching her.
The thing that really concerned Dana was that it appeared that he had her under surveillance. Dana had actually told a couple of people that if I ever turn up dead, Patrick did it.
Investigators checked Dana's phone records, searching for any clues.
The phone records indicated that Patrick had phoned Dana repeatedly.
It wasn't just some guy who, sent her a couple extra texts and then disappeared. This was somebody who was going beyond that, doing stalking type things that would be concerning in any context.
When investigators look into Patrick further, they make an alarming discovery.
Patrick was driving a white van. It was a ladder truck. We had neighbors that had identified a white van in the area around Dana's residence prior to the murder.
His work van had been seen in the alley behind the house. It was a white van, so it matched the description that the neighbors had mentioned.
Pretty much demanded that we look at him as a very real suspect in killing Dana.
Did Patrick's obsession with Dana turn deadly?
We immediately got a search warrant for his DNA, for his locker, for his vehicle.
On September 2nd, detectives find Patrick at his home address.
We served the search warrant on him. He was very belligerent and very uncooperative with us during the service of that search warrant.
He didn't want to answer questions. He didn't want to let them in the house. He did the kind of things that you might expect somebody to do if they had in fact been stalking someone and had gotten caught doing that.
Investigators bring Patrick down to the station where they tell him Dana has been murdered.
His demeanor changed 180 degrees from being belligerent and confrontational to Dana is dead. He says, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I didn't kill her. Here, please take my DNA, search everything. I'm not the one who killed her."
Detectives ask Patrick where he was the night Dana was murdered.
Patrick said that he was at work that evening. He then hung out with some friends and went to bed.
Once given the information for his alibi, investigators looked into it, and they were actually able to verify it. He had an alibi and could not have committed the murder.
We also ruled out Patrick's ladder truck with the van the neighbors told us that they saw drive around Dana's residence. There was nothing in the service of the search warrant or in our investigation that indicated that Patrick wasn't being truthful with us.
Given what he had done and the ways in which he had scared Dana prior to that, he's very lucky that his alibi could be confirmed.
Having cleared Patrick, investigators now focus on another man in Dana's life, Michael, who they learn was having a long-distance relationship with her.
Michael lived up in Canada, worked in the film industry. Dana met him when she was up in Canada visiting one of her friends.
And they hit it off, and so they started to date. But he stayed in Vancouver, and she was down in Puyallup, and that's a several-hour drive from Puyallup to Canada.
Friends tell police that their relationship was not without problems.
They said Michael would party to the level of like a teenager, that he was at a certain level of partying that Dana didn't approve of. And so Dana was a little uncomfortable with that.
There'd been a point where Dana had broken it off, but he was still interested, so they tried to make it work and get back together.
But when detectives dig deeper, they learn Michael has a darker side.
We were told that Michael was a biker, that he was a heavy drug user.
Police also uncover a significant piece of information.
Dana confessed to a friend that she'd had a one-night stand. And when Dana had that one-night stand, she was still in a relationship with Michael.
Could this have been a motive for Michael to kill Dana?
When we found out that Dana had a one-night stand, we looked at Michael as a potential suspect, possibly murdering Dana out of revenge.
Investigators searching for the killer of single mother Dana Leskowski have a new possible suspect, her boyfriend Michael. Detectives want to know if an infidelity may have led to Dana's death.
That caused us to believe that we had to rule him out as a person of interest. Michael lived in Canada, so we went up, and when we talked to Michael about Dana's death, it appeared to us that he was very emotionally overcome by it, that Dana was the love of his life, and that she had been taken out of his life, and that he was very seriously grieved.
Michael also tells police he knew about the one-night stand, but had moved on. Detectives press him further.
Michael told us that when he was on the phone with Dana on the night of her death, that she seemed a little guarded to him. He told her that he loved her, and then she didn't tell him back that she loved him, and he thought that was a little odd.
He didn't like how the conversation ended.
And that prompted him to want to get on the road and come down and see her and see if everything was okay.
Michael claims he never made it to see Dana.
He said he was stopped at the border and he was turned away. He had some legal matter up in Canada that wasn't settled, and so he wasn't admitted. There was border crossing records that verified his alibi, that he did not cross the border.
He got stopped by Border Patrol, and so he was able to show definitively that he was not anywhere near Puyallup at the time of Dana's murder.
We didn't find the evidence to support that Michael had committed the murder.
Michael is ruled out as a suspect. Police also determined the man Dana had a one-night stand with was nowhere near her house on the night of the murder.
At this point of the investigation, we just were really kind of at a dead end.
I mean, there were all these people who would have been really good, solid suspects in any homicide investigation, but all of them had alibis, and all the alibis were verified.
I was frustrated that the case wasn't moving forward, that it wasn't advancing.
With the case at a standstill, detectives searched for any detail they may have overlooked.
Where Dana's ashes are inurned, there's a book, and people can go and write their memoirs.
The book has been left open for comments since Dana's funeral.
If the perpetrator was someone who went to the funeral, and if the perpetrator was someone who maybe has some guilt about that, they may have left a clue behind.
When detectives look at the book, one entry, written over a month after the funeral, grabs their attention.
One of the memoirs that was written by Dana's niece, Amanda. And she said, "I'm so sorry I wasn't a better niece for you. 34 days clean and sober. It's all for you."
That was significant. There was something about the way that she'd written it that suggested it was a communication to Dana of remorse and to make amends for what had happened. And it was something that was significant enough to follow up on.
Why did Amanda write that she had let Dana down? Detectives have a hunch that she may know more about her aunt's death than she's been letting on.
That's it. That's the key. The key is the niece. I called Amanda in for an interview. When I asked her, "What do you know?" she said, "I wasn't there. I don't know what happened."
With Dana gone, Amanda has been missing a mother figure, getting into trouble, and as detectives learn, spending time with a rough crowd.
In the center of Puyallup downtown, we had Pioneer Park, and a lot of troubled teens would hang out there. The park kids called themselves the Park Rats. Amanda usually would be out around town in the middle of the night, hanging out with the Park Rats.
Dana would often welcome Amanda's circle of friends into her own home. Could one of the Park Rats that Amanda knows have been somehow involved in Dana's death?
And I talked to her about who of her friends would meet this profile of having upper body strength, prone to flying into a rage. And Amanda said, "Well, it sounds like you're describing Blaine." She said Blaine actually attacked her on a couch, and it was a rather brutal attack.
Blaine had come on to her, and that she had rejected him, and that he had become violent.
Had Blaine tried the same thing on Dana, only for things to turn deadly?
Blaine had been at Dana's house before in some casual get-togethers, and possibly Dana would have rebuffed that advance, and that Blaine would be the kind to fly into a rage.
Then Amanda reveals something else.
Amanda said that while we were processing her Auntie Dana's crime scene, she was across the street. She ran into Blaine there. She said that Blaine had scratches on his arms. When I get this information from Amanda, I look into Blaine and I find that he's got a violent past and he has quite a criminal history.
Police learn that Blaine's rap sheet is extensive and littered with drug and gun charges.
I felt he was a very good person of interest in the murder of Dana Laskowski.
But there's a big problem. Blaine is no longer in Washington.
I found him living in the far southeast part of the United States. I wanted to bring him back to Washington to collect his DNA, to talk to him as a person of interest. But he was not cooperating.
As investigators attempt to extradite Blaine, they seek out known criminals he's associated with and find one of them, a friend of Blaine's, serving time in jail.
I sat down with him and I said, I'm looking at Blaine as being responsible for the murder of Amanda's aunt. He's got this upper body strength, he's prone to violence. And he looked at me and he said, Blaine didn't kill Amanda's aunt. What I was told completely changed everything.
Detectives hunting the killer of Dana Laskowski have a new suspect, Blaine, the troubled friend of Dana's beloved niece, Amanda. With Blaine out of state, investigators grill his friend in jail, and what he tells them is explosive.
So police suggested to him that maybe Blaine had been involved. The friend said, no, it's not Blaine, it's Emily.
He said, Emily killed Amanda's aunt.
It's a stunning allegation. 17-year-old Emily Lauenborg is Amanda's best friend and someone who Dana treated like a daughter.
I felt what he was telling me was not possible because Dana always had an open door and was always welcoming to Emily.
Police found out that a lot of times Amanda and Emily would show up at Dana's house.
Dana was somebody that Emily could go to safely regardless of the circumstances, and Dana would take her in.
So as you can imagine, that was quite a shock to the team.
To confirm his story, investigators speak to other members of the Park Rats.
Two of these kids told me, yes, Emily killed Amanda's aunt. Blaine didn't kill Amanda's aunt.
Nobody doubts that Emily did it. Nobody.
One of these individuals told us that Emily was doing a lot of drugs.
Had Emily's reckless behavior somehow played a role in Dana's death?
I was told that they all had nicknames for each other, and that Emily's nickname was Mutant.
The first nickname that we called her was the Mutant, because she was stronger than any other girls that we knew. Everybody's scared. She'll beat your ass. She'll knock you out.
She was tough. She would challenge them to wrestling. She would beat them in wrestling. She was very intense.
And I was told she's able to choke people. She would wrap one arm around their neck, grab the other hand, and flip their body over her hip. And that was consistent with the body position that we found Dana Laskowski in. Twisted at the waist, with one arm behind her back and an injury to the neck.
And so the initial thought that it can't be her was slowly replaced with, well, maybe it could be her. She's intense, she's strong, and everybody seems to be kind of scared of her.
Did Emily actually kill Dana? And if she did, what could be her motive for committing such a heinous crime? Investigators bring Emily in for an interview.
I sat down with her, and I had a tape recorder. She said, aren't you going to turn that thing on? I would say she was quite self-confident, a little cocky.
She was not particularly cooperative with efforts to talk to her about what happened.
I said, you know, here you are, sitting in a police station under suspicion of murder, and you're playing this game with a detective. And I said, look at these people right here that have told us you killed her. And she said, those people are lying, and that she didn't do it. She got very angry. Those people are lying.
When investigators ask Emily where she was the night of the murder, she dodges the question.
She was bartering and arguing with me and not really giving me a clear defense and denial.
Officers obtain a warrant to search Emily's residence.
One of the items that they recovered from Emily's apartment was a shirt that Emily had taken from Dana.
One of her friends told us that Emily had a black shirt that belonged to Dana and that she actually wore that to Dana's funeral. We went back to the pictures of the funeral and did see that Emily was wearing a black shirt.
One possible explanation for that was rubbing her nose in it. Not only did I kill you, but I'm wearing your blouse to your funeral.
The search uncovers more incriminating evidence.
And we found this journal. And in the journal, it said, 10 things I want to do before I die. And one of those 10 things was kill somebody and get away with it.
One of the statements in the journal that Emily wrote in her own hand when talking about Amanda, because she'd gotten into an argument with Amanda, was, I could effing strangle that bitch just like her aunt.
So that was very significant. I was invigorated because I had something.
That's about as close to a confession as you're going to get. It is absolutely sufficient for me to take that to a jury and say, this is her admitting that she killed Dana Laskowski.
On March 13th, 2003, Emily is charged with first-degree murder.
When I found out that Emily did what she did, I couldn't believe it.
When you find out that such a young person could take a life, how is that possible? Someone that Dana was trying to help and care for, that had to be a huge betrayal. You just can't fathom it. You can't comprehend it. It's devastating.
Though Emily is in custody, prosecutors know most of the evidence against her is circumstantial. So they circle back to Amanda.
It had become pretty clear that Amanda was going to be the key to solving this. We needed Amanda to crack, because absent that, or a confession, there wouldn't have been enough to prove that Emily committed that crime.
If Amanda did know what happened, why hadn't she told police? And why had she covered for her best friend?
So I meet with Amanda and I said, listen, Amanda, you have led us on a wild goose chase. Starting off with Blaine, who was in another state. He didn't do this. You have not come forward with this right from the start. You know what? This is a case of conspiracy after the fact. So tell me what happened. That's when she really cried and sobbed.
Police have charged local teen Emily Lauenborg with the murder of Dana Laskowski. Now, investigators suspect Emily's best friend, Amanda, Dana's own niece, may also be involved.
I said, all right, tell me what happened. You've sent us on every possible goose chase and every rabbit trail you could head us down. It was all a bunch of lies.
Through tears, Amanda makes a horrific revelation.
Amanda disclosed that she and Emily came to Dana's house and they came to the back door. They were high on some drugs and they just went up to try to get some money. And Emily was rude and Dana said, you girls have to go.
Things quickly escalate.
Emily was being belligerent and Dana touched Emily to kind of guide her out the door, and Emily just exploded into a rage or attack.
Basically, she attacked her, put her in that wrestling hold, and squeezed too tight with some kind of scarf or fabric.
Amanda said she turned around because she didn't want to watch what was happening.
But she heard a crack, and she heard a gurgle. She heard Dana gasping for her life, and then she didn't hear anything. And that was because Dana was dead.
And then they took the money and left.
It seemed to be, by Amanda's account, that it was kind of an explosive situation that got out of control. They didn't go to the house to murder Dana.
I was told that Emily had said that Amanda was always ditching her for her aunt.
Emily, she was jealous of Dana.
It's my opinion that the motive Emily had was to get Dana's influence out of Amanda's life. And Emily just went over there with the intention of getting Dana so mad at Amanda that Amanda wouldn't be welcome at Dana's anymore. And then Emily would have achieved what she wanted. And that the murder simply got out of control because of emotions and drugs.
But why didn't Amanda come forward earlier to tell the truth about what happened that night?
I asked her, why didn't you tell us right up front, right at the start? She said, because of my family. It's so bad now. What's it going to be like now when they find out?
She wasn't involved in the murder, but she was involved because she was there at that time, and I don't know why she didn't do anything. It was upsetting and surprising to all of us.
Prosecutors need Amanda's testimony to have any hope of convicting Emily for murder. Amanda agrees and will not face any charges herself.
If she's charged with a crime, then she has the right to remain silent.
She was the star witness for the case. If we had charged her criminally, we couldn't have called her as a witness.
Despite the agreement, prosecutors fear Amanda won't keep her side of the deal.
The biggest challenge for us from a prosecution standpoint was that, setting aside Amanda's testimony, everything else was circumstantial. Wearing a blouse can be explained away. An angry journal entry can also be explained away. I think the only way that we could have been successful in front of a jury was to have Amanda take the stand. The problem was knowing exactly where Amanda's loyalties would be. She was very conflicted, and there was definitely a chance that Amanda could have taken the stand and said, I lied to the police when I said what I saw, and I didn't see any of that.
I was very concerned that the jury was going to listen to this case and look at Emily and say, I just don't buy it.
This is a case where, had we taken it to a jury, all of those questions that had come up in the investigation, all the initial leads, all of the doubts that it could really have been Emily, all the alternate explanations were certainly enough that it could have been that a jury had decided that we just didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Prosecutors face a difficult choice. Risk Emily walking free after a jury trial, or guarantee at least some jail time with a plea deal.
Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we hold the killer responsible. Emily was allowed to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter.
On January 21st, 2004, over 2 years after Dana's murder, Emily is formally sentenced.
Emily was charged as an adult. Her sentence was just under 7 years.
Even though Emily is sent to prison, her sentence brings a mix of emotions.
I felt a sense of relief that someone was now being held accountable for Dana's death, but I did feel angry.
I thought, well, at least it's something, you know. But it just was amazing that you could take the life of a young mother and only get like 6 years. Doesn't make sense.
Dana's family was upset that the sentence was so light. They felt that the person responsible for taking the life of Dana should have been given a stiffer sentence.
It was really tragic. And one of the things about the criminal justice system is it doesn't put things back the way they were. It just tries to hold people responsible so people can move forward.
I cried every night. I think I must have cried for a year. I miss her a tremendous amount, and I will think about her forever.
I don't think we ever will get over the loss of something so tragic.
I can't really say her family ever had closure, because to them, the loss was the loss of Dana. A gavel dropping doesn't undo that loss.
I miss her a lot.
I think Dana would want to be remembered as a loving mother, a loving friend, and a loving child.
please, how can I help?
I need to report a missing person. She's only 16. She's not come home.
She'd never gone missing before. She's just staying at her friends, you know, she's hiding.
Maybe she's drunk a bit too much and she's sleeping it off.
My Facebook blew up with her face, basically. It was everywhere.
I just remember wondering what's happened and what's going on.
You know, the gut feeling was getting stronger and stronger that something serious had happened.
This is something you see on the TV, this is something you read in papers.
There was a huge search operation going on over many days involving dogs, air support and boots on the ground.
And I knew then that that was my Louise. I knew she'd gone.
In the Hampshire town of Havant sits the close-knit community of Lee Park.
It's a nice, quiet area. It's nice living here, friendly. My neighbours are really nice, you know. It's a very, very cosy area to live in.
I've lived here 47 years now. People's all lovely. I enjoyed the place, I really do.
It's safe, and that's what made us move here, was the fact that it was safe and secure. There was very little crime.
When things happen, the community does pull together and help the people out. So I think in a whole, Lee Park is a good place to live.
Lee Park is also the home to popular 16-year-old Louise Smith.
As a baby, like as a newborn, she was really just quite a quiet baby, to be honest. She used to sleep through the night regularly.
She was just a really good little girl. Bradley, my brother, used to come and stay with me with her. And she'd just come in and say, "Can I play with your shoes, Auntie Hayley?" She'd go in my shoe cupboard, get all my shoes, and she'd clonk up and down the kitchen and in the hall, and she loved it. She loved dressing up, you know. She was just like, oh, she was just a lovely little girl, really good girl.
And as she grew up and she began to toddle around, you know, she started to show a cheeky sense of humour. You know, sometimes I'd look at her and she just had a certain look in her eye, and I just knew she was going to come out with something. I just knew straight away. You know, she was quite a bright and happy child.
As a young teenager, Louise enjoyed holidays and days out with her aunts and nan, and loved going to theme parks with family friend Sharon.
Louise, honestly, she had adrenaline rush on the roller coasters, especially on the Smiler at Alton Towers. She'd come to Legoland, she'd come to Chesington. She loved Chesington, especially like the tigers and that. Louise was like my own daughter. We just really enjoyed each other's company.
Louise's parents split, and her father Bradley later moved to Scotland, but maintained a close relationship.
I used to have her every fortnight for a weekend. School holidays, half terms, I'd have her for a week. And one summer holiday, she stayed with me for 5 weeks. You know, because she just wanted to stay with me. And so, you know, whenever I could, she came up to visit. We went to Edinburgh. She always wanted to see Greyfriars Bobby and touch his nose, the statue for luck. By chance, when she came up, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival was on, and we walked around and saw it, and she loved it. I could have as much contact with her as I wanted. I was always allowed a good relationship with her, you know, without any problems.
After school, Louise moved to a local college and studied veterinary care.
She loved animals. There was no doubt about that. She absolutely loved animals. Like I said, we went to Chesington, and out of everything, it was the animal shows she wanted to watch.
She just wanted to do anything, I think, with animals. You know, and the world was her oyster. I think her plans were just to get the course done and then decide what direction she was going to take with it.
Being a typical teenager, it wasn't long before Louise's attention shifted towards other interests.
Louise always had a boyfriend, always interested in boys. She's a very pretty girl, so there was no reason for her not to have a boyfriend. But some boyfriends wasn't the right sort of boyfriend for her.
She went to college, and I think she had a boyfriend and she struggled a bit, and I think she just wanted to be with him a lot. She wasn't interested in anything else, you know, she just wanted to be with him.
It's like I'd rather talk to my boyfriend than my parents, you know what I mean? It was one of them. But certainly had, you know, had chats with her, the do's and don'ts. Not that she'd ever bloody listen to me, but, yeah.
But in March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic hit the UK. And a national lockdown meant that Louise would be spending more time isolated at her mum's house. Unable to see her new boyfriend, tensions started to grow at home, prompting Louise to pack a bag and move in with her cousin and her husband, Shane Mays, nearby. And to begin with, she seemed happy. But a few months later, everything changed.
After Louise moved in Lee Park, she was regularly texting her friends saying how they treated her like a child. Having had an argument, Louise left the home address on the 7th of May. She was contacted numerous times on her phone, I think over 50 times, and didn't respond. But at some point, Louise decided to go home and clear the air, and things were sort of getting back to normal.
After making up with her cousin and Shane, the following morning, Louise makes plans for a special national holiday.
On the 8th of May, which was actually Victory in Europe Day 2020, where there were lots of celebrations going in gardens, etc., in people's homes, that morning she woke up and she did a Snapchat around about midday saying that she's got, you know, a huge hangover, her head hurts as a result of drinking. It was established that Louise was going to meet her boyfriend at the skate park at around about 3 p.m. that afternoon. But we know that Louise didn't arrive at the skate park, and that's when concerns were being raised by her boyfriend.
Louise's cousin makes numerous attempts to call her mobile. But after an hour of phoning, the line disconnects. And by 6 p.m, Louise's cousin is left with no choice but to call 999.
Some details would have been taken by the call taker at that point to establish how high risk Louise was, so what were her vulnerabilities. Obviously she was 16 years of age, so one would argue she's still a child and therefore vulnerable anyway. But we would also look at our records to see what we know about Louise. Some could say she was streetwise, only been missing 3 hours, not particularly alarming at that particular point, and there was no other information to suggest she would be high risk at that stage.
With the case considered fairly low risk, police don't arrive at Louise's cousin's address until 1 a.m. to write up a missing persons report.
And those inquiries would be basic inquiries, speaking to friends and family, where she may be hanging out.
Shane explains to police that he accompanied Louise towards the skate park in Emsworth that afternoon, before heading off in a different direction towards Tesco. Officers want to know if there could be any reason why Louise may have left of her own accord.
So if it came out that she had had a falling out, then the police may take the view, well, she's sulking, she's just going to be staying with a friend or hanging around the park or something overnight, teaching them a bit of a lesson to worry about, you know, and then she'll turn up safe and well in the morning.
But the following morning, there is still no signs of Louise.
I actually got a message saying Louise has gone missing, but lockdown was on. And I technically was in a different country. I didn't know if I could travel. I was trying to arrange things.
She'd never gone missing before. She'd obviously stayed at people's houses, but she always let people know where she was. I just thought, no, she hadn't. She's just it's drama. It was like, you know, I thought, no, perhaps she's just saying it, she's just letting everyone believe that she's gone missing. She's just staying at her friends, you know, she's hiding.
Yet as friends and family try to reach out to Louise with no luck, concern sets in.
It was completely out of character for her to disappear entirely, especially not be on her phone, because she was always on her phone. That was the scary thing. That was the thing that niggled in my mind, you know, made me think, maybe something has happened, maybe something has happened. But I tried to block them thoughts out and think of it differently and go, no, she's just missing, she's going to turn up, because the alternative was just too upsetting.
In the Hampshire suburb of Lee Park, concern is growing for 16-year-old Louise Smith, who was last seen heading towards a nearby skate park the previous afternoon to meet her boyfriend. And with a missing person investigation underway, police attempt to paint a picture of Louise's life before she disappeared.
I would describe Louise as a typical 16-year-old girl. She was going through that phase with her mother where she was starting to rebel a little bit. She wanted her own independence. They would regularly have arguments at home. She wanted to spend more time with her boyfriend. And you've got to remember, this was at a time during the pandemic when lockdown was occurring, and so tensions were high in most households, I would suggest.
Police also take into consideration what else was going on during the day Louise vanished.
The day that Louise went missing was the 8th of May, which was VE Day, and that was being celebrated nationally. So there were lots of parties going on, but because this was lockdown, the government restrictions at that time meant that you could only celebrate in your garden. But there was a huge party atmosphere going on within the community. And again, as a police officer, you're thinking, well, perhaps Louise has gone to one of these parties, maybe she's drunk a bit too much and she's sleeping it off. If she's gone to friends and it is during lockdown, then potentially the friends might be thinking, well, I may have committed an offence here during lockdown, and I don't want to tell the police that Louise is staying with me. So there's some additional difficulties at that particular time with that missing person inquiry.
As the hours tick by, police dig deeper, questioning friends and family in the hope of finding clues into Louise's disappearance.
Louise was 16 years of age. She's vulnerable by definition of her age anyway. We know that she'd had problems at home in the past. We know that she'd had mental health problems, and also she was using alcohol. So all this information coming in really ramps up our concerns and makes her a high-risk missing person because of those vulnerabilities. And so her being out and not in contact with anyone is really concerning for me, because she's a risk, and not just to family members, but other people out there could take advantage of her.
And as night turns to morning, police issue an appeal to the public for sightings of Louise.
When she didn't materialise the following day, that's when the concerns were raised. And so, as you would normally do with a missing person inquiry, you would release details of Louise's image to the local media. You'd be asking for the public's help. Did you see Louise? Was she at one of these parties?
So I'm on a lot of Facebook groups, local Facebook groups around the area, and there was missing pages saying that, have you seen this girl? But yeah, it was just, my Facebook blew up with her face, basically. It was everywhere.
When we found out Louise was missing, I said we was all worried about her.
I just remember being there, missing posters, being around, everyone wondering what's happened and what's going on.
It certainly took off on social media, and the community were doing all they can to try and find Louise by reposting the appeals that the police had put out.
Police continue to focus their inquiries in the area where Louise was reportedly last seen, the Emsworth skate park.
Officers would be tasked to survey the area to see what CCTV cameras were in that area, going along the most obvious routes to take you to the skate park in Emsworth. We would capture that CCTV, which would be quite a time-consuming process, and then someone would have to review that footage.
And while police scour the area for CCTV, the local community also gets involved in the search for Louise.
A lot of people around Emsworth are looking for her, because obviously that was the last place she was seen. That was their centre point, and what I'm working out from there.
The community seemed to come together to try and sort of help everybody to sort of get through the situation that we were in.
There was people out all the time, in family and in the community Lee Park. There was loads of people out and about looking for her. It was a massive, massive hunt. There was lots of volunteers as well looking for her.
I did go out in the car many times looking for her. I remember once that I thought I'd see her and I jumped out the motor, and I was hoping it was her, I think. And it did really look like her. Unfortunately, it wasn't her. But I wanted to do all I could for Louise in the hope that I was going to find her.
There was a hell of a lot of hope that Louise Smith was going to be found safe and well.
But as 2 days pass, there is still no signs of Louise.
As the case got on during the lockdown, there was no more news. It started to get a bit more escalated, and it definitely was an atmosphere in the local area.
The gut feeling was getting stronger and stronger that something serious had happened.
I think with any missing person inquiry, statistically, if someone isn't located within about 48 hours, the chances are they may not be alive.
I think I just didn't allow myself to think like that, because the hope of her still, you know, of her turning up overrode everything out, because that was my only concern. I just wanted my little girl to turn up.
But it's when police look into the reason why Louise moved out of her mum's home at the start of lockdown, concern grows.
She'd had an argument with her mum, and she didn't like the boyfriend of the mum, who her mum used to call her stepdad. She didn't like him. She did not like him at all. So in the end, that's why she moved. That's why she moved out.
Could this revelation be in any way connected to Louise's disappearance? But after making their inquiries, police are able to rule out Louise's stepdad from the investigation. Attention then turns to Louise's boyfriend, who was due to have met her the afternoon of her disappearance.
We were told that Louise was intending to meet her boyfriend at the skate park in Emsworth at 3 p.m. that afternoon.
Her boyfriend was a nice guy. I dated him in year 9 for about a month. There's a little teenage little thing, just when you're kids, and we was good friends, and I see him sometimes around here.
But Louise's boyfriend claims she never turned up as arranged. So where did Louise go? With Louise's phone still switched off, police retrieve cell phone data to try to track her whereabouts on the day she went missing, to establish if she did walk to the skate park.
So we would expect to look at the call data and the cell site analysis to show that that's where her phone is moving. But actually what it did show was that it was moving in a completely different direction towards Havant Thicket. What a phone tells you is where the phone is. It doesn't necessarily tell you where the person is. So it could have been that Louise has lost her phone and someone's taken that phone and it's headed off in that direction. It could have been she'd been robbed and that phone's gone there. So always keeping an open mind.
6 days into Louise's disappearance, there's a sudden breakthrough. 2 people are arrested in Lee Park.
I was just shocked. It was something I just thought, this is something you see on the TV, this is something you read in papers, and I couldn't believe it. I was just gobsmacked.
Louise's cousin and her husband, Shane Mays, are taken in for questioning.
Both were interviewed at length by detectives at local police stations, and Shane was adamant that he had done nothing wrong. As far as he was concerned, he walked with Louise the route that he said he walked towards the skate park, where she was then going to meet her boyfriend at 3 o'clock, and that was the last he saw of her.
But for police investigating Shane's account, things don't add up. Having trawled hours of CCTV footage of the local area, there is no sign of Louise or Shane heading towards the skate park.
Alarm bells start to ring in relation to Shane Mays. You start questioning, well, why is he lying? I think once you establish that perhaps some lies have been told to the police by people that were responsible for caring for Louise at that time, concern starts to raise.
The latest evidence raises suspicion against Shane. But what led to his wife's arrest?
I think when you look at the fact that she reported her missing only 3 hours after sort of a last sighting of Louise, because for me, a 16-year-old not coming home at 6 o'clock in the evening is not particularly something to be concerned about, particularly when it's not the parents raising the alarm. When you layer that with the other information that we're getting, it's starting to paint a picture that is one of concern. So having exhausted pretty much our inquiries based around the account that Shane had given us, and also looking at Louise's phone data, it got to the point where we had made a decision that Shane hadn't been completely honest with us around Louise's movements and her disappearance. And so the decision was taken to arrest both of them on suspicion of kidnap.
In Havant, 16-year-old Louise Smith has been missing for 6 days after she failed to meet her boyfriend at a local skate park. Analysis of phone records and CCTV has failed to show signs of Louise going there, and investigations soon rule out her boyfriend. But police have arrested Louise's cousin and her husband, Shane Mays, on suspicion of her kidnap.
So Shane Mays, I would describe, he was a 30-year-old man. He was out of work. His day consisted of pretty much getting up in the morning, going to the shops, returning home, and then spending numerous hours on his computer, playing games. Didn't appear to be actively looking for work.
Louise never said to me, oh, I'm scared of him or anything like that. She never said that to me. She never told me that.
With both Shane and his wife in custody, police conduct a search of their home for any sign of Louise.
The police would have been looking for obvious evidence, but also it would have been a forensic search as well. So we would have seized all of their clothing that would have been worn on that day. We would have gone through any computers that were there. We would have taken phones as well to establish their movements, see if there were any other phones that we weren't aware of.
Police find no evidence of Louise still in the house. So focus turns to Havant Thicket, since that was the last location of Louise's phone signal.
What it allowed us to do was then focus all of our resources in that area to really flush out, you know, what clues were there and hopefully try and identify where Louise would be. And so there was a huge search operation going on over many days involving dogs, air support and boots on the ground looking for Louise or clues to establish where Louise may be. But also we could then move our media appeal to people that were using Havant Thicket on that day, VE celebration day, where a lot of people, you know, would have been out getting their fresh air during lockdown and may have seen something suspicious. So we were really focusing on that area at that point.
While the search for Louise intensifies, police have no concrete evidence to prove Shane or his wife had anything to do with her disappearance.
A decision was taken to release them on bail, but with conditions that they reside elsewhere other than their home address. And so they were placed in a local hotel near to their home address, which gave us the time and space to actually conduct our inquiries at their home address without interference from either party.
You had a watch on 24 hours a day. There were 77 officers, vehicles surrounding the block. You had them knocking on doors in the general area, obviously trying to see if they could get any further information.
The police had been working on a theory of kidnap. But 13 days after going missing, everything changed.
Louise's body was found in the north of the thicket, covered up. Louise's body had been severely damaged, both by fire but also by violence, we believe. There was some attempt to cover up the body with sticks and wood. Clearly a fire had been set. It was fairly obvious at that point that this wasn't an accident, this wasn't self-harm, but this was a murder. We're just approaching the area where Louise's body was found, and you can see it's hugely dense here. You can't even see the footpath that we've just come off of, so you can only imagine what it would be like in the summer when you've got those really tall ferns around. So this is the site where sadly Louise was found, and yeah, I mean there's a fire that's taken place here. I think that's what saddens me about this, it should be an area where kids can come and play and you know, have fun and relax and feel safe. But this kind of beautiful location has really been tarred now with this horrific attack.
With a body found, the crime scene is immediately locked down and preserved so the body can be formally identified and clues to a potential suspect can be uncovered. And a pathologist is called in.
I was asked to attend at Havant Thicket. It was very clear from quite a distance away that we were dealing with a severely burnt body. Thinking about the nature of the attack at the scene, It was simply obvious that there was some severe damage to the face. Now, that implied heavy impacts of some sort, and it was also clear that a stick had been inserted into the body. That's the sort of thing that could not possibly have happened accidentally. And so it was a question of identifying the particular stick and suggesting to the police how this might be managed. In this particular case, I said to them, I think what you need to do is to collect any DNA you can before anybody touches it.
With the true horror of the crime unfolding, the police need to know who could be responsible for such a callous and brutal killing.
As far as any more detail is concerned, there was really nothing much I could tell the police otherwise until we'd got on and got the body to the mortuary and examined in more detail.
And while Louise's remains are taken to the mortuary and DNA samples taken to the laboratory for examination, it isn't long before news reaches Louise's father while on his way to England to join the search.
We was about halfway on the journey when I got the call, said they'd found a body. I was told, you can't tell anyone, you can't tell anyone. You know, nobody, not even your family, in case they say something, because it could jeopardise the case. It was a very anxious journey because I just wanted to get here and, you know, see firsthand what was going on, what's happening.
I had somebody message me that they had seen a black private ambulance come out of the thicket. I got in the motor. I drove down to the thicket. Obviously, we weren't allowed into the thicket. I had my friend in the car with me, and there was just police everywhere. And I knew then that that was my Louise. I knew she'd gone.
I remember it vividly, but I got the family round because Bradley was coming down. He came in and told me in the kitchen, and I just broke down. I went, nah, it's not her. He went, Hayley, there's been a body found. I went, no, it's not her, it's not her. They got it wrong. It's not her. I just didn't think it would be.
The news that everyone feared spreads across the tight-knit community.
When I read the story on one of the local community pages saying that a body had been found, they couldn't reveal who it was, but parents of Louise had been told. And it was absolutely horrible.
The outpouring of grief was huge within the community, particularly on social media. There was a huge sense of upset and disbelief, and I guess despair, really, and I think the same for the police. I think when you're dealing with a missing person inquiry, you're always hoping that you're going to find that person safe and well. And then when you do find a body, it just punches you in the guts, really.
The hunt for Louise's killer is now on. And firmly in the police's sights is one man, Shane Mays. The person who had been looking after Louise.
What we found at about 3:10 that afternoon was an image of Shane Mays coming out of Havant Thicket and walking towards his mother's address, which is close by. Having said that, he was at the other end of the town near the skate park in Emsworth.
The CCTV evidence places Shane near the scene of the crime. And when police receive forensic evidence, there's a breakthrough.
Having carried out a number of examinations both at the crime scene and also through post-mortem examination on Louise, and also the search that we did back at the Mays flat, we were able to establish that we had a DNA match from Shane Mays on a wooden stick that was found at the crime scene near Louise's body. But also a speck of blood was also found on his trainers, which came back to Louise's DNA.
Shane Mays is rearrested, but this time he's charged with the murder of Louise Smith. His wife is also rearrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. At a hearing, Shane Mays pleads not guilty to murder, which means a trial will ultimately take place.
I'd say the pressure really starts at that point, because you'll then set fairly quickly a trial date. where you need to be trial ready. It's a painstaking process. You need to be 100% sure that that is the person that you say is the killer of your victim.
After further investigations and without any evidence against Shane's wife, she is released without charge. With all evidence pointing to Shane Mays and a trial now set, the question everyone wants the answer to is why would Shane want to brutally murder a 16-year-old girl living in his care? Shane Mays has been charged with the murder of 16-year-old Louise Smith after DNA and CCTV evidence linked him to the crime. While police prepare a case for trial, Louise's family and friends have the agonizing task of saying goodbye to their loved one.
The day of Louise's funeral, there was hundreds and hundreds of people. People had gone out and put purple bows the night before her funeral on the lampposts.
The community just all pulled together. It was lovely. You know, they all stood out on the streets and right from outside her house right up to the crematorium.
Seeing everybody out there, it was overwhelming. For me, personally, being a very private person as well, it was also quite wonderful just to know that they were there. And Lou would have been looking down thinking, wow, I didn't realise I was so loved. And, you know, everyone was there, everyone. It was just, the world stopped just for a moment, just for her.
Six months after Louise's funeral, the trial is set to begin at Winchester Crown Court. But just as the court case begins, there's a surprising twist.
Day one of the trial, his defence team entered a plea for guilty to manslaughter. So effectively he was saying, I admit to killing Louise, but I didn't mean to do it.
He basically then admitted that he had taken her to have a chat and everything because they'd had a falling out the night before, and that he basically just wanted to chat with her. They argued, she hit him with a stick apparently, and then he attacked her because he lost his temper. He just lost control.
He said that he just like hit her and punched her in the face and did what he did to her, horrific things. And then he said he walked away and he heard her moaning.
We examined that plea. We weren't happy with that. We were confident it was a murder. We were confident this was pre-planned. And so we stuck with our guns and said, no, this is a murder trial, and that's what we're going to be seeking for.
As the prosecution presents its case, the jury is shown a Snapchat video showing Shane tickling Louise's feet while she was staying with him.
Some of the things we heard in court was there was a lot of, you know, flirting going on between Shane and Louise, and, you know, she was still a child. He should not have been interacting with her in the way that he was. It wasn't appropriate at all.
But according to neighbours, Shane had a more aggressive side.
The feeling of my wife and I being around Shane Mays was one that we didn't want to be around him. Shane would be the sort of person, I believe, that would belt you for something if he thought you'd done something wrong. Running up the days to the incident, because they were upstairs neighbours, it was quite a lot of raised voices. A lot of it was targeted at Louise.
The court then hears how unhappy Louise really was while living at Shane Mays.
When it came out in court that she was reaching out to other people, she hadn't spoken to me about it. The only indication I ever got was one day she just said, look, I don't want to stay, I don't want to be here at the moment, Dad. I want to come up and see you. And as I said, lockdown stopped that plan, unfortunately. So it was horrible. It was an awful thing for me to deal with, you know, because I just felt like I'd let her down.
2 days before Louise's disappearance, she phoned me and said she needed some lady products. And I believe that that might have been a cry for help because she wasn't happy. And unfortunately, I blame myself that I let her down. And I do live with that, knowing maybe if I'd gone and took that to her, that she might have just opened up to me and told me.
The court has shown CCTV of Louise and Shane walking together the day before her murder.
The day before the incident, we actually saw them. Louise did actually say hello, but that was about all. She seemed very reserved. I think Shane was having a really bad influence on her, to sort of try not to speak to anybody, just focusing on getting back up to their flat.
The prosecution reveals to the court horrific details from the post-mortem.
In Louise's case, the whole central part of her face and both jaws had been broken into many pieces. The lower jaw in a couple of places, and the upper jaw and the whole facial skeleton from the eyebrows down to the teeth broken into many pieces. Implication of that is that there have been some heavy blows from a heavy object. And the obvious thing in woodland would be a heavy branch of some sort, something of that kind. Large parts of the body had been burnt off. The upper limbs, the head, much of the chest, much of the belly wall at the sides especially, and to a certain extent at the front.
The level of damage to Louise's body meant it was almost impossible to establish a cause of death. But the most shocking bit of information was yet to come.
It was also clear that a stick had been inserted into the body. Something that I was asked about specifically was whether or not Louise was pregnant. Now, there was nothing left at autopsy to say that she might have been pregnant. The womb muscle itself was really quite well preserved. The lining of the womb that gives you a better idea of whether she might have been pregnant or not, all gone, long since vanished, so I couldn't say that. But the reason that's important is someone might have tried to, the assailant might have tried to disturb a pregnancy by putting a stick in there. That suggestion was made.
After days of breaking down all their evidence to the courtroom, the prosecution pieced together the full horror of what likely occurred during the last few hours of Louise's life.
That morning, Louise woke up and she'd arranged to meet her boyfriend that afternoon at the skate park in Emsworth. So having seen her phone active around about midday, we know that Louise and Shane Mays left the address around about 1 o'clock.
But instead of heading in the direction towards the skate park, her phone signal moves towards Havant Thicket, revealing Louise's final movements on foot with her killer.
How did Louise end up going to the thicket on foot with Shane Mays? There's no suggestion that she was forced there or dragged there. The thicket itself is huge, and there are so many areas you can go to where you could not see anyone else. That started to show that this was pre-planned and that he lured Louise to that location that was remote with the intention of possibly sexually assaulting her.
At some point, Shane assaults and murders Louise and is seen on CCTV leaving the thicket at 3:30 p.m, heading towards his mum's house. Around 5 p.m, he arrives at Iceland Supermarket in Lee Park.
He went and bought some pizzas for both him, CJ and Louise, knowing that Louise was never going to be returning home to eat that pizza.
By 6:30 p.m, Shane's wife calls the police, reporting Louise missing.
Hello, police, how can I help?
I need to report a missing person. She's only 16. She's not come home.
But I think once the police became involved, I believe that he realised that at some stage we were probably going to locate Louise because her phone would show that she was in Havant Thicket. And so it's my belief that he returned to the crime scene at some stage, probably during nighttime hours, so that he wouldn't be seen. And he then built effectively a bonfire over Louise and set fire to her, possibly using an accelerant to destroy the evidence, knowing that it's highly unlikely that you'd get a dog walker or a pedestrian walking through the thicket during the night reporting a small fire taking place.
He went back a couple of days after and finished her off. We're hoping that she died instantly so she wouldn't go through all that pain.
After a gruelling 3-week trial at Winchester Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Shay Mays is found guilty of murder and is sentenced to 25 years in prison.
I don't believe he should ever get out. I've always been the one that says, you take a life, you should do a life.
I think capital punishment should be brought back. And I think they should lose their life like they took a life, but not straight away. I truly believe if you're sentenced to, as he was, 25 years, that he should serve that 25 years, knowing for that 25 years, at the end of that 25 years, he's going to die. Because that'll have to deal with him in his head all the time. It's a psychological thing. And to me, that's a fitting punishment.
With Shay Mays now behind bars, Louise's murder leaves a lasting mark on the local community.
Now I reflect on it and I think, I wished I'd done this or I wished I'd done that. But obviously what's done is done. I can't do nothing about it.
To think that something could happen of someone of her age, someone so young, dying of something so terrible, it makes you not want to walk the streets at night, especially as a female.
It's never going to be the same in our little community here, because of what's going on. It's been wicked, really.
There's definitely a dark cloud lingering, definitely a sense of mourning, I guess, of Louise. And every time I drive past the thicket now, I always look in. You just think to yourself, that's where it happened.
I don't think I could ever go there, and I don't really see many people go there when I drive past to go to the local shop. It's really much of a barren, kind of left alone area now.
And 2 years since her passing, family and friends try to come to terms to life without Louise.
The thing that sticks in my mind is the last minutes of her life. Was she scared? You know, she must have been scared. She must have been so scared. That's what really hurts me. I think she must be calling out for us and we couldn't get to her.
People say time will heal. It doesn't. Time allows you to cope better. And I am starting to cope a bit better now, but I'm not there. You know, sometimes I'll be having a good time. I'll be having a great day, and then I feel guilty. Because I'm like, why should I be happy? Yeah, it's awful. And the whole family try to get on with it, but all of us think about her daily. Of course we do. Of course we do. We miss her.